Chapter 441, Going to the Relic. After the white mist trembled 3 times, Grand Master Liu stared forward, taking 3 breaths in 9 seconds and letting out a turbid breath. He slowly descended to the ground from the height of half a meter in the air and turned to look at Su Long, then saluted and said, "This is a D-class relic, which will be opened in about 20 hours, since it was broken apart by external forces. It will open for about 10 hours after opening." As soon as the remark was made, every martial artist present looked excited. Su Long also smiled and looked at one of his subordinates, then said to him while waving his hand, "Issue an announcement that a relic of the Dark Wind Island will open soon. Thus all the martial artists who are at the peak strength stage or beyond can come over to investigate. You should tell them the details of the giant ship and warn them to stay away from it." "Yes." The man replied while saluting, then took out the phone to assign the tasks. "Director Zhang, thank you for giving us help this time. It's rather late, so you can go back to rest at any time. The relic will open at about 9 o'clock tomorrow. Come here if you are interested in it," Su Long said to Zhang Han with a smile. "Well, tell me some details about the relic." "I haven't heard much about it," Zhang Han said casually. Don't you know about the relics?" Su Long was shocked, then shook his head and said with a smile, "I'll tell you in detail." At that point, Xian also pricked up her ears as her big eyes blinked, taking on a very serious look. Su Long took 2 steps to approach Zhang Han. After glancing at the white mist, he said, "The ancient relics are scattered all over the world. Among them, such revealed and stabilized ones could be detected in detail. Although no one knows what is inside, the levels can be measured according to the fluctuation at the entrance. Over hundreds of years, the civilization of relics is also gradually taking shape. Among them, the lowest level is F, followed by E, D, C, B, A. The order of sorting is in accordance with their safety coefficient. For instance, each obvious strength martial artist can enter the F-class relics safely as long as they remain careful, although some incredible things will also kill many people. Martial artists at the inward strength stage at least can enter the E-class relics, while D-class relics correspond to peak strength, C-class relics correspond to chi strength, and so on. As for the origin of sorting of these letters, one is in consideration of the commonality, and the second is in line with the ranks of Western adepts, whose strengths correspond to martial artists' strengths I have just mentioned. This is how it is. Oh. Zhang Han nodded slightly and said, "Can anyone enter the relics?" "Yes." Su Long nodded. "This is also regarded as an unwritten rule. For example, we, the spirit group, will definitely get a variety of treasures if we block the news and explore it by ourselves. But we will have access to more treasures if we inform the martial artists in Singapore. In addition, we can buy them as well, and it is a win-win cooperation. But once the news is released, it will also be known to martial artists in other places. Relics have been known as the world's treasures for a long time. Sure enough, there are several treasures that sustain the energy of worldlets in such stabilized worldlets. Up to now, we once found a divine object, a 5 holy object, and countless heaven-grade treasures at one time. However, it was a relic that appeared 50 years ago. In order to get those treasures, 18 Grand Master died and countless Chi Strength Masters were killed. It was too tragic. Most of them did not die from fighting, but from the unpredictable relics. There were always some terrible native creatures living inside. Su Long's eyes were filled with emotions. Since he prepared to state it in detail, he told Zhang Han all the information he knew. The higher a relic's rank is, the higher ranked treasures will appear. However, the risk possibility will also increase. Every relic possesses a best treasure. Once it is obtained by a martial artist, the worldlet will dissipate instantly, and people inside will come out from the entrance. If someone gains a subprime treasure, the opening time of the relic will shorten. When the time is up, everyone will be sent out. In general, heaven-grade treasures will appear in D-class relics. As for holy objects, They seldom show up in D-class relics, appear in C-class relics half the time, and must come out in B-class relics, where divine objects will possibly emerge. Anyway, people only encountered them by chance. Well, Zhang Han nodded, knowing what relics were. In fact, Zhang Han had entered so many relics, and sometimes, he had survived a narrow escape from death. However, the treasures in the ruins were indeed precious. Although Zhang Han had a rough idea of relics, he still took the initiative to ask Su Long about the particular case. He pursued stability of exploration rather than taking risks now, for he had a family. "We'll go back now," Zhang Han said. As for Xian, she kept silent next to Zhang Han, digesting the news she had just heard. Up to now, she realized that this world was so mysterious, and there were many unknown places and things. Her world outlook had collapsed before, but now it was padded constantly with new knowledge. Zhang Han was aware that he did not need to teach her anything because she would gradually know more by getting in touch with such mysterious things. Send direct to Zhang back. Su Long sent Zhang Han and Xian to the helicopter and closed the door after giving a command to his subordinates. Then he nodded to Zhang Han with a smile. The helicopter took off slowly, leaving Darkwind Island. About an hour later, it directly landed not far from the castle hotel. After returning to the room, they saw Ziqiang and Xuanhuan whispering in the chairs beside the bed. Ziqiang stood up and whispered, "Here you are." He found that Xian was wearing Zhang Han's coat. On seeing this, he felt warm and become more satisfied with his son-in-law. Now that they had a baby, Ziqiang was really afraid that Zhang Han would treat Xian badly, for she had no choice after all. They were not like lovers who were just in love with each other, and they could not break up easily. Fortunately, Zhang Han left an extremely great impression on him. What a perfect man he was. He, however, believed that time revealed a person's heart, and he would truly understand Zhang Han's temperament after observing him for a little longer. "Ah, yes, Dad, Mom, you can go to sleep now. Don't get up early tomorrow and sleep for a little longer." Xian grinned and said, "Well, okay, we'll go back to our room." Xuanhuan walked over to Xian with a smile and touched her head. As for Ziqiang, he patted Zhang Han on the arm, as if Zhang Han had gone out to do him a favor. It was obvious that he was satisfied with Zhang Han. Then Zhang Han and Xian returned to their room, took off their clothes, and went to bed. "Will you turn over? Don't press on her." Whispering, Xian leaned in Zhang Han's arms and glanced at Meng, who was sleeping beside Zhang Han on the other side. "Of course not, just fall asleep," Zhang Han said with a chuckle. "Well." Xian nodded obediently, leaning honestly against Zhang Han's arm. After 2 minutes, "Honey," Xian looked up and whispered. Zhang Han responded, "Yeah? I can't fall asleep." Xian pouted slightly. "Shall I tell you a story?" Zhang Han said hesitantly, "Forget it, I will fall asleep after lying here for a while." Xian twisted her body, lying more comfortably in Zhang Han's arms. Zhang Han gently fondled her with his right hand. Gradually, after a few minutes when she slowly fell asleep, Zhang Han closed his eyes to rest. The night went by silently. At 7 o'clock the next morning, Meng opened her eyes in a daze, then sat up and rubbed her eyes. Seeing that Zhang Han gently looked at her as usual, she was so delighted. "Ouch, I am in the big bed. Ha ha." Zhang Han burst into laughter and stretched out his hand to touch Meng's little head, then said, "Do you like to sleep in the big bed?" Yes. Actually, Meng likes sleeping next to Papa and Mama," Meng said while pouting. She grew without Papa's company for many years. Now, since she finally found her Papa, who loved her so much, the little princess really clung to Zhang Han. "Mama is still sleeping, so we need to talk in a lower voice, Papa." Meng reached out a finger of her right hand, putting it in front of her tender lips and hushing him. "You're so clever," Zhang Han said with a smile and also lowered his voice. He sighed with emotion in his mind that Xian was really hard in those years since she taught Meng Meng so well. Meng Meng looked around and found that there was nothing interesting, so she threw herself into Zhang Han's arms and asked, "Papa, can we play touch-touch fly?" "Okay." Zhang Han smiled and stretched out the index finger of his left hand. Meng Meng reached out her small index finger and touched Zhang Han's finger twice, then quickly swung it upward and said at the same time, "Touch, touch, fly." "Ah, you are so slow, even slower than Meng Meng, Papa." Meng Meng is so awesome, your Papa is not a patch on you." "Ha ha ha, how awesome Meng Meng is." Meng Meng's big eyes were full of happiness. "How powerful you are. Even more powerful than Papa." Papa is the most powerful man, and Meng Meng ranks second." "Well, no, Mama is the second most powerful, while Meng Meng is third. It is also great that I rank third." Meng Meng stuck 3 of her fingers up at Zhang Han seriously. Her cute appearance made Zhang Han burst out laughing. After they played for a while, Xian also opened her eyes. The 3 of them stayed in bed for 10 minutes. Then Xian took Meng Meng to wash up. It was almost 8 o'clock when they finished tidying up. After thinking for a while, Xian sent a message through WeChat to Ziqiang and Zixi respectively. Learning that they all got up, everyone went to the restaurant downstairs for breakfast. "We'll go sightseeing again." When they left the hotel and headed for the play area, Meng Meng cheered, feeling extremely delighted. In general, people would enjoy themselves only staying in Resorts World Sentosa for about 3 days, but they skipped a lot of games that were not suitable for Meng Meng. With the purpose of accompanying Meng Meng, they visited almost all the interesting things in 2 days. According to the original schedule, they had to stay there that night, moving to another special hotel. However, considering that they were going to the relic with Zhang Han, they returned to the Ziklan. After having dinner, Ziqiang played 3 chess matches with Zhang Han, all ended up with Zhang Han's failure. At 9 o'clock, Xian waved to Zhang Han and asked him to come to the bedroom to coax Meng Meng, who fell asleep after half an hour. Then they greeted Ziqiang and Zixiniu. "Han, be careful and make sure you are safe," Ziqiang said repeatedly. He also knew that they saw the relic of Darkwind Island during the day. In fact, Zilong, Zihu, and some juniors of the Ziklan, as well as Wang Zanzong and companions, also prepared to go there. At that moment, they were waiting for Zhang Han and Xian in front of the gate. "Don't worry, father-in-law, I'll make sure that nothing goes wrong," Zhang Han responded with a confident smile. "Well, come back early." Ziqiang smiled. "I know." At that point, Xian was in denim trousers, sneakers, long-sleeved clothes, and a jacket. She tied her hair into a ponytail, wearing a beige cap. In the meantime, she also specially dressed up Zhang Han, who did not wear a formal suit but black jeans, a white shirt, and a grey trench coat. After finishing speaking, Xian held Zhang Han's arms and went to the entrance. Then all of them got into cars and slowly headed for the port. Chapter 442, We Are Surrounded. When the group of people arrived at the port and boarded the yacht, Instructor Liu said eagerly, "Well, it's the first time I've been to the ruins. It's exciting just thinking about it." Zhao Feng, Ahu, and Elder Meng were members of the security group, while Xiong stayed in Hong Kong to arrange the daily training for the company's personnel. Instructor Liu also brought his 3 subordinates. He was at the Chi strength stage and his subordinates were at the peak strength stage, which was enough for them to explore the ruins. Usually, the area of the relics is relatively large. This is a D-level relic, and we should be careful even though everyone is at the stage of peak strength or above. Zilong solemnly warned them, "No one knows what's in it, and there's a cursed ship. You must stay away from the ship when you encounter it, and..." He looked at Zhang Han and said with hesitation, "Mr. Zhang, are you sure you want to take Xian in? You may not encounter each other when you entered the ruins. You may be separated from each other, or even be in jeopardy. Yan, after all, is not a martial artist." If something goes wrong, you will regret it all your life. Uncle Long, don't worry, how can I put her in danger? Of course I have a solution, Zhang Han said with a smile. All right then. Zilong forced a smile, not knowing what Zhang Han could do. He had never heard that someone could take others to the same place when entering the ruins. But Zhang Han was so confident that it seemed he had arranged everything, so Zilong stopped meddling in Zhang Han's business. There may be a lot of things in the world hidden in the ruins that you haven't seen before. It's rated D, indicating that the danger level of it is acceptable for the peak strength martial artists. But we can't relax our vigilance. Zilong looked at other people and said, if you are not confident enough, just explore in a safer place on the periphery, and you may also get some natural precious materials. Yes. Zihu nodded, took over the topic, and said in a deep voice, what's more, the enemy we're going to face is not just the things inside the ruins, but also other people. An innocent man gets into trouble because of his wealth. Even if we don't get the treasure, we may also bear the malice of others. After all, there are no rules in the ruins. Hearing Zihu's explanation, everyone nodded slightly. However, Zhang Han smiled. He knew that all the people here were experienced, not novices who were unfamiliar with the world, especially Zhao Feng, who had quick wits and no one dared to provoke him. Usually, there is one of the most important natural precious materials in the relics, and once it is taken away, the relics will disappear. In addition, there are lower-level treasures, and you may be expelled from the relics at any time after getting them because this will shorten the time for the existence of the relics. As for the third-class treasures, you can take them at will without worrying about the impact on the relics. Therefore, our exploration focuses on finding treasures separately rather than looking for teammates. After all, inside the relics, electronic products, including mobile phones, often fail. It's very difficult for you to get in touch with each other, Zilong said slowly. Not necessarily. Zihu suddenly smiled, looked at the yacht tens of meters away from them, and said, if I'm not mistaken, that yacht is from the Heavenly Talisman sect in Zhu of the Hua Nation, and it is Aoyuan, the third elder, who leads the team of the disciples. Those disciples may be going to take the practical examination, and they have ways to contact their teammates in the ruins with the help of precious talismans. They are all flowers growing in the greenhouse. Wang Zanzong smiled and added, the practical examination is also a kind of training for them. Although many disciples have never seen a bloody scene before and will definitely panic after entering the ruins, they all have protective means to ensure their safety. Talismans? Zhang Han looked at the yacht not far away with great interest. Though Zhang Han knew little about the talismans, he used to buy many talismans with the crystal stone in his space ring. Obviously, the ruins were regarded as a place for practical examination for many sects, who had always kept a low profile. Therefore, it wasn't until the relics appeared that Zhang Han found that there were many kinds of sects in the world he was in. After driving for nearly an hour, at 10:20 p.m., the yacht arrived at the front of Dark Wind Island. From a distance, there were countless yachts, and those in the dense crowd that had gotten off the yachts were waiting at the entrance of the ruins. Not far from the front of the mist cluster, there were more than 10 channels. Everyone had to wear iron shoes to walk 5 meters across the ground, and only those who passed could enter the ruins. Zhang Han and his team got off their yachts, and after half an hour in line, they arrived at the test site. Xian looked at the front and whispered, "What is that? The shoes seem heavy. I can't move them." "Don't worry, I'm here." Zhang Han smiled and pinched Xian's palm. "Look, that man failed." Xian looked at the front and whispered. Looking forward, Zhang Han saw a man in his early 20s wearing the large iron shoes, who began to struggle after walking 1 meter forward. When he covered another half meter, his face turned red, but he could not move any farther. "You'd better give up. Only martial artists at the peak strength stage or above can enter the ruins. What are you doing here as an inward strength green hand?" A staff member standing in the side aisle frowned and scolded him. In the eyes of the staff member, the man who had just failed was obviously making fun of his life. The man blushed and left the test site in embarrassment. Being at the inward strength stage, he just wanted to give it a try, and it turned out that he was not qualified. As for others, they were trying to pass the test in various ways. Among the next group of participants, a man was exhausted after walking less than 3 meters. However, when the staff was about to help him leave, that man made a casting gesture, and then passed the test step by step. The staff no longer frowned because martial artists in the world had all kinds of skills, although not everyone could pass the test purely with strength. As long as they could manage it by whatever means, they were qualified to enter the relics. Of course, some martial artists at the stage of inward strength could also pass the test with such auxiliary tools as treasures or talismans. The staff members at the entrance to the ruins would not forbid them because passing the test was the only standard. Only 1% of the people failed the exam, and soon after, it was Zhang Han's turn. There were more than 10 channels in front of him, and in front of each channel, there were 5 pairs of shoes, allowing 5 people to pass the channel together. This is a magnetic channel, and the shoes will be attached to the magnetic plate below. The farther you go in, the stronger the magnetic force will be. Zhang Han took Xian's hand and explained in a low voice, "Oh, then I'll give it a try." Without taking off her sneakers, Xian put on a pair of large iron shoes. Using a little effort, she was unable to lift them up and couldn't help sticking out the tip of her tongue in embarrassment. Ha ha ha. Zhang Han burst into laughter. The staff standing by frowned again. What's that couple doing? Are they chatting? When he was about to persuade the couple to give up, they soon covered 5 meters in a casual way as if they were walking on flat ground without any difficulty. Wow! They were at least above the Chi Strength Master stage. The staff member scratched his head in shame, looked at the backs of the couple, and then waved to the next group of people. Get ready. Zilong, Zihu, and Wang Ming also walked through the channel together with Zhang Han. They passed through the passage and walked more than 20 meters to the front of the mist cluster. In front of them, the staff had built the recommended stairs and platforms, on which 2 people were guarding. Grandmaster Zhang. The 2 staff members hurriedly and respectfully greeted Zhang Han. They were working for so long and had come to the island before. After meeting Zhang Han, they said, "The relics have been open for an hour and will be closed in about 7 hours. I see." Zhang Han nodded. "Well, are you going in first?" Zilong looked at Zhang Han, wondering how he could bring Xian in, so as to ensure that they were in the same place. Glancing at him and smiling, Zhang Han put his right hand around Xian's waist and slightly shook his left fingers to let 9 cards fly out of his coat pocket. There was still a silk thread between the cards to connect them, and then they surrounded Zhang Han and Xian. Then Zhang Han leapt forward with Xian in his arms and disappeared into the mist. Hiss. Zilong could not help taking a breath of cool air and murmuring doubtfully, "What kind of means is this? It's so weird." While muttering, he took a step forward and disappeared into the mist. Zihu and Wang Ming also entered the ruins one after another. The 2 staff members looked at each other, and the one with yellow hair speculated, "If I'm right, it seems that Xian, the princess of the Zi family, is beside Master Zhang. Isn't that bullshit? Mr. Zhang came to Singapore for an engagement. How could he hold another woman?" said his companion contemptuously. "Yes, but I heard that Xian is not a martial artist." The yellow-haired man grinned. "Yes, you remind me that Xian is an ordinary woman, though she is a pretty and famous star. How could she pass through the magnetic channel?" His companion scratched his head in confusion. "Are you stupid? With the help of Master Zhang, could she fail the test?" The man with yellow hair said jealously, "They obviously went in for sightseeing, but after entering the ruins, they will be randomly assigned to different positions, right? He must have a way. Didn't you see the black card just flying out? All right." The yellow-haired man's companion looked enviously at the entrance of the ruins and he said, "It's so nice. When can I have such a good backer to take me to search for treasures in the ruins? Just forget it. Stop, someone's coming. When the yellow-haired man saw 5 more people coming, he stopped talking. On the other side, before jumping down, Xian was a little nervous, but she was not afraid because her husband would protect her. This was the first time she has experienced such a wonderful transmission, and she kept blinking her big eyes excitedly and looking around curiously. The moment she jumped down, she entered a white world. She could feel that Zhang Han was still holding her and could see that half of the cards around her were emitting a faint light. It's amazing. Are we going to enter another world? As soon as Xian generated this idea, the scene in front of her changed. She could still see Zhang Han and the cards that had fallen into his jacket pocket. Wow, we're in. Xian said happily while continuing to look left and right. What a large grassland. The air is quite fresh but not better than that on Mount New Moon. Why is it bright here? I don't see the sun. Xian raised her head, finding the sky above foggy. It was daytime, but she could not sense the direction of the sun. The corresponding space here may be similar to the Antarctic or the Arctic, and the time of day and night may be extended, just like the polar day and night that can last for half a year, Zhang Han said with a chuckle, carefully observing the surroundings. There were no other creatures around them, only the endless grassland, which was twice as high as the pleasant-smelling grass on Mount New Moon, and they felt comfortable walking on it. Why is there a white fog behind us? It looks like a sandstorm. Xian looked back and frowned anxiously. Far behind them, there was a dense fog slowly approaching them, indicating a terrible sandstorm, like the dark clouds before a heavy rain. There is the edge of the worldlet, and we will be transmitted to the edge of other areas if we approach there. It seems that we are on the edge of the worldlet. Go ahead. Zhang Han took Xian's hand and walked forward. At the same time, Zhang Han began to use his soul sense to detect the situation within 50 meters. If they were underground, he could only reach a distance of about 10 meters in this way. In different media, the detection distance of the soul sense would be limited to different degrees. In the seawater, Zhang Han could detect up to 30 meters. At the same time, Zhang Han also scanned the height of 5 meters above his head, forming an oval-shaped protective cover with his soul sense. However, Zhang Han's soul sense was still weak now, and he needed to take a rest every time he had been using it for an hour or two. Treasure hunting was only Zhang Han's secondary purpose, as he mainly wanted to go sightseeing here with Xian. Hiss, hiss. Zhang Han sniffed a few times and felt that there was no energy fluctuation of treasures within a kilometer around him, so he gave up his plan to search for treasures in this grassland. Spirit treasures usually appeared in the central area and were guarded by some ferocious monsters, and there were few treasures on such an empty grassland. What are you sniffing? Xian asked curiously. I'm trying to determine if there are any treasures here according to their smell, because I was born with the supernatural power named the treasure-sniffing nose. Zhang Han smiled and replied, Really? Xian blinked at Zhang Han and said, Is your nose more sensitive than a dog's? Zhang Han was stupefied and then amused. He stretched out his right hand and patted Xian's buttocks gently, then pinched them a few more times, and said, Dare to tease your husband? Do you want to be punished? Ah, hee hee. Xian twisted her body and said with a smile, Can you smell me? Hearing this, Zhang Han hugged Xian from the front, moving her delicate face close to him, and then said vaguely, Of course your smell is fragrant, just like body fragrance. I want to. Every time I smell it. Zhang Han stretched his head forward, while Xian laughed and put out her hand to block Zhang Han's mouth, saying repeatedly, Okay, let's start the exploration. It will be closed in 7 hours. Then give me a kiss, Zhang Han said with a chuckle. Mwah. Xian cleverly kissed Zhang Han with her red lips, then took his hand and ran forward happily. Ha ha ha, it's so broad here, whoa. Xian's laughter echoed on this side of the grassland. She felt like she was on her honeymoon with Zhang Han. Hand in hand, Zhang Han looked at his wife tenderly, and was satisfied to make her so happy. After running for 5 minutes, Xian was a little short of breath. "Oh, let's take a rest. I ran too fast just now," said Xian. "Or shall I carry you on my back?" Zhang Han asked. "Great." Xian nodded. Zhang Han squatted down in front of Xian. "I'm coming up." Xian lightly jumped and hugged Zhang Han. Then she put her head close to Zhang Han's and whispered in his ear, "We are like the legendary piggy carrying his wife. Well, have you ever seen such a handsome piggy?" Zhang Han patted her buttocks and asked, "Yes, it's you, mischievous." Zhang Han grinned. Xian, who used to be cold and indifferent, had bared her soul to Zhang Han and become more and more lively and happy. Zhang Han liked her carefree state so much. It was a man's greatest success to be able to let his wife live in this state. As Zhang Han moved forward faster and faster, Xian gradually extended her arms to feel the wind brought by their speed. From beginning to end, she closed her eyes and smiled happily. As they went deeper and deeper into the grass, the height of the grass grew higher and higher. When the grass was about to reach his waist, Zhang Han suddenly stopped. "What's wrong?" Xian asked curiously. "We're surrounded by some little things." Zhang Han chuckled. Through his soul sense, Zhang Han saw a swarm of snakes 50 meters away. Countless black snakes, with their terrifying tongues, were quickly surrounding Zhang Han and Xian. Each snake was as thick as an adult's arm, and most of them were at the stage of obvious strength. Although their strength was ordinary, there were so many of them that even a martial artist at the peak strength stage would have to struggle to get free from them. Zhang Han didn't take action immediately, but silently waited for them to come near to let Xian take a look at the scene. 9 cards flew out of Zhang Han's pocket, spinning slowly around him and Xian at different angles. "What are they?" Xian looked around carefully. "They are coming," Zhang Han said. All of a sudden, a dark shadow flew out in front of them. Hiss! A piercing sound could be heard. Xian looked over and was startled. Ah! At this moment, a light black light flashed faster in front of her eyes. The attacking snake was cut up and fell 3 meters away from the front of them, writhing. "It's a snake!" Xian covered her mouth while watching what was happening in shock. The snake twisted for a while, turned into liquid, sank into the grass, and dissipated, as if it had never existed before. Suddenly, hiss, hiss, hiss. With a rasping noise, dense groups of snakes began attacking them from the front, back, left, and right. At this time, the 9 cards around them began to rotate rapidly, forming a whirlwind. No matter which direction the snake came from, they were directly destroyed by the whirlwind. "So many snakes, Zhang Han, we are surrounded." Xian looked around, her voice shaking slightly. Because she had seen many similar supernatural phenomena, up until now, Xian could still keep calm, but someone else who was exposed to this for the first time might have been scared to death. "Don't worry, I'll take out this card and the snakes will run away." Zhang Han smiled and that flood dragon card appeared between his fingers. "What is this?" Xian was surprised to find that the pattern on the card was moving. "A flood dragon soul is in it. I'll show you," Zhang Han said, and there was a flash of light in his eyes. At the same time, he threw the card forward in a casual way. Ow! After the card flew out, it immediately stopped in the air 3 meters in front of him. Then, a translucent wave surged out of the card, forming a larger and larger whirlpool. In the waves, a ferocious dragon was roaring and rolling up and down. All the snakes burped. The hundreds of thousands of snakes around Zhang Han and Xian came to a sudden stop. They stared at the soul of the dragon, shivering and daring not to move any further. "Why?" Xian was a little shocked. "The card's deterrence to them is too great. I'll take back some pressure and they can escape." Zhang Han grinned while controlling the flood dragon soul to weaken its strength to the profound stage. The surrounding snakes looked at each other, turned around quickly, and escaped. Within seconds, all the snakes disappeared. "What an amazing card!" Xian grinned, blinked her big eyes, and looked at Zhang Han with a silly yet lovely expression. Chapter 443, A Chance Encounter. So there are dragons in the world? I saw one just now, it looked fierce and was rolling up and down. Xian pursed her lips, remembering the horrible dragon's appearance and actions. Come on, take a closer look at it. Zhang Han smiled and waved his hand to let the energy released just now return to the card. Then the card flew back to Zhang Han's hand. It's coming out. Zhang Han reminded Xian, and then his eyes started to shine. Suddenly, the flood dragon soul came out of the card. This time, there was no wave, only the dragon's body. Although the dragon was only about the size of a palm, no one would deny that it was a giant monster. The flood dragon soul flew to Xian's hand and began to revolve around her white and delicate palm. It was impossible to imagine how ferocious it was just now. It looks fierce, like a monster. It's a little cool. Xian stared at the flood dragon soul and moved her left palm. It is an unconscious soul at the early stage of the building base, which is similar to the Grand Master early stage. Zhang Han explained. How powerful is it? Xian looked at the flood dragon soul in surprise and then asked, what's the foundation stage? I only know of the obvious strength, inward strength, peak strength, and chi strength, and those at the chi strength stage could be called masters, right? The level above them is Wu Dao Grand Master, like Uncle Long and Hu. I also know that you are at the early stage of the building base with 10 inches Danshan, which is better than the perfect building base, am I right? Xian asked and smiled at Zhang Han, looking forward to his praise. Yes, not even one word is wrong. Zhang Han smiled, reached out his right hand, and patted Xian gently on the head. You remember it all clearly? Of course. Xian replied with a smile, and then asked curiously, why are the classification levels you mentioned different from here? What did you say last time about the stages? What I said last time was about the levels in the cultivation world, which starts from the chi refining stage. Zhang Han took back the flood dragon soul, put the card in his hand, and took Xian's hand and began to walk. A cultivator at the chi refining stage is similar to a chi strength master here in terms of strength. They both have spiritual force in their meridians, and thus you can call them Qigong masters. The chi refining stage is the entry stage of cultivation in the cultivation world, just like the foundation stage here. Huh? Xian was stunned. So you are still in the entry stage? Yes. Zhang Han smiled and said, there is a saying that cultivators below the innateness level are still ordinary people. The innateness level is the beginning of cultivation, and then an elixir is born in your Danshan, which will grow and advance to Yuan Ying. You won't be killed unless your Yuan Ying dies. Even if your body is destroyed, above the level of Yuan Ying, there is the God transformation level, and your soul sense will advance to divine sense. Then there is the shadow refining level, the decking level, and finally, the past tribulation level, which is divided into 9 stages. When you reach the 9th stage of the past tribulation level, you'll get a chance to be an immortal. So many levels. Xian blinked quickly while keeping all these levels in mind. Then she looked at Zhang Han and asked, what's your level before? Your husband used to be in the 9th stage of the past tribulation level, but he failed in the immortal test and was sent back by the thunder. Zhang Han recalled the terrifying divine thunder over the sky and narrowed his eyes. Holding Xian's hand tighter, he continued, it's unprecedented, and I don't know why, but I'm glad that I have a home when I get back. Ha ha, mwah. Xian stood on tiptoe, kissed Zhang Han's cheek, and then said, my husband used to be the top man. You are already a Grand Master, so how powerful will you be when you advance to the 9th stage of the past tribulation level? Well. Zhang Han thought for a while then replied, I can destroy Singapore in one strike. That's too scary. Xian stuck out her tongue at Zhang Han. They had gone deep into the grass, which was higher than their chest. Zhang Han suddenly took a look in front and said, not far ahead, someone is being surrounded and attacked by snakes. 50 meters in front of him, Zhang Han felt a large group of snakes through his soul sense. The Flood Dragon card in Zhang Han's hand was so intimidating that as long as the snakes entered his scanning range, they would tremble and escape in panic. Let's go and see. Be careful and observe whether or not they are bad guys. Xian looked forward with some vigilance. After hearing this, Zhang Han was stupefied, and then couldn't help laughing. Your serious appearance is too cute. We should be careful. Xian stuck out her tongue and laughed. I just want to remind you. Anyway, I don't care about safety because I'm the safest with you by my side. Yes. Zhang Han nodded and said, I'm here, and I won't let you get hurt. Then Zhang Han took Xian's hand and went on. After walking for about a minute, they vaguely heard someone shouting in front of them. It seemed that the battle was very fierce. Stop, snake-killing talisman. Look at yourself, you are so uncompetitive. Fire talisman, burn you little demon snakes to death. Fat brother has enough talismans to exterminate you. After this somewhat pompous speech, there was a wave of energy coming from the front. Then Zhang Han heard two other voices of a male and a female, and they were expressing their admiration to someone. Eldest martial brother is amazing. Ah, elder martial brother can kill a group of snakes at once. He is so powerful. Well, of course. Your eldest martial brother has been collecting talismans for years and now I have ample scope of their abilities. Cool. Wait, what happened to the snakes? They are escaping. Stop. Come back. Damn it, you are good at assessing the situation. That eldest martial brother shouted. Then let's move on. Younger martial brother Lu seems to be not far ahead. Another male voice arose. There seems to be someone behind us. As soon as the woman's voice came out, they were quiet. Zhang Han took Xian's hand and walked more than 30 meters forward, and then a field with a circumference of 20 meters appeared in the grass. 3 people were standing in the center of the field and looking at them. Their leader was a fat man with a round face and a thick neck, while the other man was about 1.7 meters tall, well-balanced, and somewhat handsome. Next to them was a woman with a ponytail, who was only 1.6 meters tall with an above-average appearance. With the help of his soul sense, Zhang Han knew that the fat man was a profound stage master, who was obviously the eldest martial brother. The other two were both at the stage of peak strength. The dozen talismans in the fat man's hands had disappeared. Zhang Han found that there was a small cloth pocket at his waist, which should be a storage bag with independent space inside it. They are from the Heavenly Talisman sect. Zhang Han confirmed their background, not only according to the talismans used by the fat man, but also because there was a small character heaven on the right arm of their clothes. While Zhang Han and Xian were looking at them, the 3 martial artists were also looking back at the couple. The atmosphere was quiet. A white talisman appeared in the hands of the fat man. After self-ignition, it turned into smoke and went into his palm, making the fat man's eyes flash slightly. They don't even have chi, 2 green hands at the peak strength stage. He breathed a sigh of relief, for peak strength martial artists were not a threat to them. He was relieved and said with a smile, "Nice to meet you." "Nice to meet you," replied Xian. The man hesitated and asked, "Are you from the back?" "Yes, we are passing by." "Wait. What are you doing?" The man's eyes suddenly widened as he was attracted by the action of Xian holding Zhang Han's arm. "What's wrong?" Xian said curiously. Even Zhang Han was stunned. He didn't know what the fat man was talking about. "How can you hold each other?" The man was shocked, and began to look at Xian carefully. Although the woman's face was covered by a cap, he could still confirm that she was a beauty from the part of her exposed cheek. Xian looked at Zhang Han, and her eyes suddenly flashed a sly light. Then she smiled and replied, "He just saved me, so I fell in love with him." "What? The hero saves a beauty? How come I'm not so lucky?" The fat man looks distressed. "Well, elder brother." His 2 companions reminded him with some embarrassment. "Alas." The fat man sighed again, thought about it, took out a dozen talismans, and handed them to his younger martial brother. You go to meet them first, and I'll try my luck by myself." Zhang and Zhang Han almost laughed, for they found that this guy really wanted to be a hero and save a beauty. He seemed to have been looking forward to such a thing for a long time. "Oh, brother." The younger martial sister stamped her feet. "We must meet junior brother Lu first, and then go to find elder Rao." This. The fat man hesitated for a while, and finally nodded his head in frustration. "Okay, let's meet junior brother Lu first." "Well, brother and lady, do you want to go in, too, together?" Zhang did not speak, but looked at Zhang Han and pretended to be obedient. The fat man's facial muscles trembled a few times, and he felt even more desperate. "When can I save a beauty as a hero?" Zhang Han looked at Zhang and nodded. Okay. If Zhang Han came here alone, he would not be interested in communicating with the people he met. Instead, he would go treasure hunting directly because of the limited time, but this time, he wanted to go sightseeing with Zhang, and having more friends would make her happier. The fat man had let down his guard since the testing talisman just now told him Zhang Han and Zhang were both at the peak strength stage. He decided that since they had the same destination, he would take these two people with him. Otherwise, if they also met a group of snakes, it might be difficult for them to escape. So the 5 people formed a temporary team, and the fat man took out 2 talismans and threw them forward. The 2 talismans began to drift forward slowly, releasing a gust of wind, blowing open the grass that was almost overhead, and opening up a 5-meter wide road for them. The team advanced rapidly into the depths of the grassland. "Are you in love now?" asked the fat man, somewhat surprised. "Yes, we are in love. We'll be together when we go out and in the future." Zhang gave Zhang Han a hug. The fat man's expression froze. The corners of his mouth twitched with despair and envy. "Just answer yes or no. Why do you tell me the details? Brother, where did you save her? How did you save her?" The fat man asked politely with a respectful gesture and expression, as if he were consulting an elder. Zhang Han took a look at Zhang and chuckled. "I found that she was trying to hide from some snakes, and it was very dangerous. So I killed the snakes and decided to pursue her since she is pretty." "And then?" the man asked in a hurry. "There's no follow-up. She promised to be with me." Zhang Han smiled. "So fast, hiss, so fast, ugh." The fat man covered his face with his right hand and was very distressed. "Brother Ma." The younger martial sister was ashamed and hurriedly reminded him. "Well," the fat man cleared his throat and said with a smile, "I'm Mardi, and they are my younger martial sister and brother. May I know your names?" Zhang looked down and thought for a moment, then she looked up and said with a smile, "I'm Zi and he is Han Yang. Our names match so well, and maybe we are destined to be a couple." Puff, cough. Mardi choked on a mouthful of saliva, looked ahead, and murmured, "Then who should I save, Sister Nu?" "What a profound question." Puff. Zhang laughed out loud. "Ha ha, I'm sorry." Mardi made an obeisance and gave them 2 talismans. "We shall cherish this chance acquaintance. These 2 talismans are for you, and they can help you not only defend the sudden attack of the snakes, but also prevent mosquito bites. I'm not trying to trick you, by the way. Could you use Qi? If you haven't learned how to use a talisman yet, you are unable to activate the 2 of them." "Yes," Zhang Han replied. Zhang took the talisman, smiled, and said, "Thank you." "You are welcome." Mardi smiled. Zhang picked up the palm-sized talismans and began to study them carefully. These 2 pieces of paper were light blue and felt a little hard, like gold paper. There were yellow patterns like traditional Chinese characters on the paper, but all the strokes were crooked or distorted. Zhang Han poured his spiritual force into a talisman to activate it. All of a sudden, the talisman began igniting in Zhang Han's hands. Wow! Zhang was shocked. When the talisman was about to burn out, it began to shine like the stars, forming a light circle around Zhang, and then the light faded away. It's strange. At the end of this amazing experience, Xian moved her right hand and put the remaining talisman in her pocket. Mahdi took a glance at her, and his mouth was trembling slightly. Is she that kind of silly, innocent, and sweet girl? Though she is beautiful and has a little chi within her, indicating that she is at the late stage of peak strength, she is still surprised as if it were the first time she has seen a talisman. Why can't I encounter such a lovely girl? But it's no wonder, this brother is a little more handsome than me. Brother Han Yang and Beauty Z, are you locals? The younger martial brother asked. Well, we should be locals, but we usually live in Hong Kong, Xian answered. In fact, she had exposed her real relationship with Zhang Han because she said we. But her audience was focused on other things and didn't find the flaws in her words. Mahdi laughed and said, we live very close, we are disciples of the Heavenly Talisman sect in Zhu. In this way, they chatted casually and walked forward quickly. From time to time, Mahdi took out several talismans to pave the way, but they didn't meet any snakes along the way, which made Mahdi very confused. They walked for more than an hour. Xian walked by herself in the first 20 minutes, and then asked Zhang Han to carry her on his back, which aroused the admiration of Mahdi and his companions. Soon after, they clearly felt that they were going uphill. After another minute, their vision suddenly widened. Wow, what a big forest! Mahdi said in a loud voice. There was a large forest in the distance in front of them, and they couldn't see its edge on the left and right sides. The trees in the forest were very high, and they found themselves standing on a high slope with grass under 20 centimeters, as if they had just stepped out of a cornfield. Although the forest seemed close at hand, they still had a long way to go. At the previous speed, it would take them half an hour to reach the edge of the forest. Standing on the slope, they could see a lot of people running to the forest from the left and right sides. While most of them were alone, a few of them formed teams of 3 or 5. Suddenly, the younger martial sister's eyes fixed on the distance below. There's a fight over there. Huh? Mahdi looked in that direction and found that a group of 3 was fighting against a group of 5. Didn't junior brother Lu form a team with 2 people? It's not them who are fighting, is it? A golden talisman appeared in his hand, and in a moment, it turned into starlight and disappeared. Mahdi's expression soon became serious. That's them, let's go. Mahdi screamed and hurried down the hill. Let's go and have a look. Zhang Han looked at Xian, encircled her waist with his right hand, and followed Mahdi forward. Mahdi and his companions were running fast, but Zhang Han, with Xian in his arms, kept following them 5 meters behind. They ran for 7 minutes and saw what was going on. On one side were 5 black men attacking with knives and swords, and their leader was using nunchakus. Junior brother Lu and his 2 companions were defending. They kept throwing out talismans one by one, but because of the strength disparity, they were still at a disadvantage. When they came near, they heard the small-eyed black man, who was the leader of the group, shout indifferently, "Give me all the talismans, and I won't destroy your corpses. You are courting death." Mahdi roared and rushed at them. With a shake of his hand, 4 talismans appeared, which were put between his fingers and thrown forward with great force. These 4 talismans flew at the 5 people and turned into fireballs or ice cones to attack them. The faces of the 5 changed as they quickly backed away to avoid the attack. After discovering the other side's helper, they knew that they could not fight anymore, and the man with small eyes cursed, "All of you from the Heavenly Talisman sect will be killed here soon or later." After that, the 5 men turned around and ran quickly to the forest. Elder Martial Brother Ma, if you came later, we would not be able to hold on. They are 5 profound stage martial artists, said the pale-faced junior brother Lu, panting. He was a chi strength master and his 2 companions were at the stage of peak strength. Therefore, he had been fighting with the enemies as the main force, waiting for Mahdi's rescue. Who are they? Mahdi frowned and asked. They come from the Evil Wind sect in Indonesia with one of their branch leaders. They saw us before and intended to kill us. When we got here, they were already waiting for us. Junior brother Lu took a long breath. Evil Wind Sect, last time, when we were competing for the Lanks in Flower, they killed the 8th elder of our sect. We haven't gotten our revenge yet, and they still come to challenge us. Mardi gnashed his teeth in hatred. We need to join Elder as soon as possible. Elder Marshall brother who is on the right side of the forest. Let's go to find him first. Junior brother Lu suggested. Okay. Mardi nodded his head. When he was about to take the lead to leave, he saw Zhang Han and Xian not far behind, so he stopped. After thinking about it, he went over to them and handed a dozen talismans to Xian. Brother Han Yang and Beauty Zi. Mardi said, the forest should be the central area and it must be more dangerous. With your strength, you'd better wait here and not take any risks. These talismans are for you, and most of them are used for defense. I hope you can cherish this chance acquaintance and do not refuse them. After finishing this serious speech, Mardi looked at Xian and added, if you want to thank me, if you have any beautiful sisters, don't forget to introduce them to me. I left my phone number on the back of the talismans. With that, Mardi smiled, turned around, and ran to the right with his team. Looking at the talismans in her hand, Xian felt it so funny, but at the same time, she was moved. The martial arts world is very dangerous, but there are also many kind people. Chapter 444, The Central Area. People like him are rare. Zhang Han looked at Mardi's back, smiled, and said, he has a chivalrous spirit and is destined to become a legend. Yes. Xian nodded slightly, then looked forward, and said with surprise, the trees in front are really tall. Many of the leaves are blue, and red, white, green, pink, so beautiful. There is a saying that makes sense, sometimes the more beautiful things are, the more dangerous they are. The forest ahead is more dangerous than the grassland. Let's go and take a look. Zhang Han took Xian's hand and walked to the forest. Well, let's go. These talismans should be well preserved. Xian gently put the dozen talismans into her pocket. Why not try the mosquito-repellent talismans first? Zhang Han chuckled and slightly moved his fingers. 5 pieces of talismans flew out of Xian's pocket, turned into starlight, surrounded Xian in a circle, and then disappeared. Although it was not visible, with the help of his soul sense, Zhang Han could feel that Xian's body was surrounded by 5 layers of energy. Taking this opportunity, Zhang Han could have a rest. At present, his soul sense was weak and could not be used for a long time. Zhang Han and Xian walked slowly the whole way. About half an hour later, they came to the forest. The trees here are so tall. Xian looked up and found that the trees here were 10 times larger than those in the outside world. The luxuriant branches and leaves blocked out the sun and made the whole forest dark. The trunks here were all like those of the hundreds of years old trees, very thick, almost 2 meters in diameter, but their surface was very smooth. Looking up along the trunk, Xian found that only at a very high position did the branches extend to the side. There were a lot of slightly damp dead leaves and grass on the ground, and she felt like she was stepping on a carpet. The forest was very quiet, and no one else could be seen around, which was reasonable. The area of this forest was not small, and thus the explorers would not gather in groups after being disturbed. However, Zhang Han felt that the forest was round, because he had seen the arc of the forest edge when he was on the hillside. It's so dark in here. After walking in for 10 minutes, Xian increased her efforts to hold Zhang Han. It's okay, even if it gets darker, I would still feel what's happening nearby. When you become a cultivator in the future, you'll be more powerful and will understand the method I am using now, Zhang Han replied. Oh, then, isn't there any treasure here? Have you found any treasures? Use your nose. Xian suddenly remembered Zhang Han's treasure-sniffing nose, and couldn't help asking with interest. I used it just now, Zhang Han grinned and said, there are some first-class spirit treasures around. They are of poor quality, so I didn't pick them up. Xian pursed her lips and said, but aren't first-class spirit treasures still a treasure? Let's go and have a look. Okay. There is one more than 40 meters in front of us on the left. Let's go and check it out. Zhang Han took Xian to the direction of treasure. Soon, they arrived at their destination, only to find a palm-sized reddish mushroom under a tree that was glowing slightly. What kind of mushroom is this? It's beautiful, Xian said with a wink. An ordinary poisonous mushroom that can absorb some energy by itself. It's just a first-class treasure, Zhang Han replied. Is it poisonous? We won't take it, Xian pouted and said. Zhang Han looked into the forest and said, let's move on, there's some light ahead. Okay. The two of them continued to walk inward for about 20 minutes, and there was light in the dark forest. The light came from the willows, which were about 10 meters high. Although they were not tall, they were like clouds, because their luxuriant branches and leaves were shining with blue light, like crystal, making this area into a fairyland. This was an endless ocean of blue light. Wonderful! Xian's eyes gradually widened. The trees live on meat. They are a kind of cannibal tree, Zhang Han said with a faint smile. Huh? They can eat people? Xian was taken aback. They are all sleeping. You can only be attacked by them if you stand under the trees for more than 10 seconds. Several fire talismans are enough to ensure our safety. Zhang Han made a gesture to make 4 cards fly out of his coat pocket and 4 fire talismans fly out of Xian's clothes. After the fire talismans were activated, clusters of flames were immediately released and absorbed by Zhang Han's 4 cards. Suddenly, a layer of flame appeared on the cards in the 4 directions of both of them. Then Zhang Han took Xian's hand and walked deep into the forest. The trees they passed by didn't respond, just like ordinary trees. Just now, I was thinking of taking some pictures. Xian looked around at the glowing trees and mumbled, you can take photos here. Do you want me to take some for you? Zhang Han was amused. But I want to take a picture with you. Xian pouted. That's easy. Zhang Han shook his head with a smile, took out his mobile phone from his pocket, clicked on the camera, threw the mobile phone forward, and made it float 5 meters away. At the same time, the sound of the camera was heard. Oh, I'm not ready. I haven't done my makeup today. Xian straightened up and took off her hat to show her delicate cheeks. After making a lot of poses, Xian suddenly stopped and said, make the mobile phone come closer. Okay. Zhang Han controlled the mobile phone and had it fly toward them. Xian stood on tiptoe, hugged Zhang Han's neck, and kissed him on the cheek. Crack. They were kissing in front of the glowing tree, and the camera recorded the beautiful moment. Just then, a cry came from afar. You're daydreaming about catching up with me. Xian shyly lowered her head, paused for a moment, and asked, huh? Does that sound familiar? Is it Instructor Liu? Zhang Han looked forward. The voice became clearer and closer to them. Damn it, you can't catch up with me even if you run for a year. What's the point of that? After about 20 seconds, Instructor Liu quickly ran into Zhang Han's and Xian's vision from the right side. His appearance made Xian a little confused. He strapped a lot of plants around his body and tied a belt as thick as his arm around his waist. His arms, chest, and neck were also covered with treasures. It was a worthwhile trip for him to get so many treasures. Ah! Instructor Liu didn't see the 2 people standing on the side clearly, and he was shocked. After all, there were too many treasures on him. If he were to be stopped and attacked from the back and front, he would be in trouble. But when he took a closer look, ha 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 ha, boss. Instructor Li's eyes lit up as he ran toward Zhang Han and Xian, laughing. With sweat on his forehead, he gasped and said, I'm so lucky. I'm almost too tired to run. There was a black man after me, trying to take my treasures. As soon as Instructor Liu had finished speaking, a man dressed in black came running quickly from behind him. If he was in the dark forest just now, it would be difficult for anyone who had no soul sense to discover him, even if he was right beside them. The black man became alert when he saw that Instructor Liu had found 2 helpers. He extended his right hand to show that he was holding a long knife upside down, which was reflecting a cold light. he said slowly in rather stiff Chinese, "Give me your treasures, otherwise I'll kill you." He spoke and stared at his enemies without expression. After thinking for a while, he added, "I'm from the Evil Wind sect, and our sect chief is not far away. I'll give you 3 seconds. 3. At the beginning of the countdown, he leaned forward a little, which was a posture of being ready for attack. He believed that both Zhang Han and Xian were at the peak strength stage since there was no wave of qi around them. Therefore, he decided to attack them without hesitation. If he was given another chance, he would not chase Instructor Liu, but there was no if. "You are full of too much bullshit," Zhang Han said calmly and waved his hand. Suddenly, the black man was hit away like a fly. After drawing an arc through the air, he hit a willow tree, spat out blood, and fell to the ground. He also came from the Evil Wind sect. "Is it powerful?" Xian asked curiously. "Who?" Instructor Liu sighed and said, "No matter in the ruins or in reality, the Evil Wind sect always acts ruthlessly like this, and no one dares to provoke its disciples and members in the local area. This time, with their branch leader here, they would surely be making trouble for us again." After explaining the situation, Instructor Liu added excitedly, "Boss, look, I've got so many natural precious materials, and we can make another batch of elixirs when we go back." Looking at the circles of spiritual herbs wrapped around Instructor Liu, Xian said sincerely, "You've got quite a lot." "Of course, sometimes the detection instruments are very useful," Instructor Liu said triumphantly. "Why are you holding this?" Xian asked, looking at the long knife in the hand of Instructor Liu. Instructor Liu was not armed when he entered the ruins. The color of this long knife was very similar to bone, and except for the sharp edge, the other parts of it were uneven. Remembering how he got the long knife, Instructor Liu curled his lip and said unhappily, "Well, don't mention it, I'm so unlucky. Have you noticed that my hair has been shaved? As soon as I came in, a skeleton began attacking me with this knife. If not for my quick reaction, you would never see me again." "Skeletons?" Xian's eyes widened in surprise. "Yes, we seem to be in a place dominated by dark energy." Instructor Liu grinned and said, "Running half an hour further, you'll find dead trees all around, and the soil there is black. The skeletons with this kind of bone knife will suddenly appear to attack passers-by. There are many of them, and each one is at the inward strength stage." "Let's go and have a look," Zhang Han said, taking the lead to go inside. Behind them, the willow branches and leaves beside the black man began to shake and rapidly extended down, wrapping around him in an instant. Then the branches gradually shortened until the black man was finally sucked into the trunk, as if he had never existed. They walked deep into the forest for more than 40 minutes. During this period, Instructor Liu searched around and harvested some more spiritual herbs. Soon after they left the willows, the light in front of them was brighter, because the trees here had become dead trees without leaves, and they could see the grey sky. When they looked around, they found a light mist among the dead trees, adding a sense of mystery to the area. In the fog, there were 6 or 7 skeletons wandering nearby. "I'll destroy them." Instructor Liu volunteered to run to a skeleton and raised his long knife at it. The skeleton was directly chopped up by him and scattered on the ground. He did so several times, and all the skeletons nearby were cut to pieces. Zhang Han looked at them a few times and sensed a little energy surrounding the skeleton fragments. Obviously, in a short time, they would gather together again into a complete skeleton and stand up again. This area is really dominated by dark energy. Zhang Han looked forward and went on, saying, "We're close to the central area. Once they passed through this area, they would almost arrive at the center, where there would be some high-level treasures." Chapter 445, There is always someone stronger. It's a large area. Looking around, Instructor Liu found that the foggy dead tree area became a vast expanse of whiteness, with a visibility of only 60 to 70 meters. Suddenly, he was stunned and said, "By the way, boss, when I just landed in this area, I heard a huge metal friction sound." At that time, The 5 skeleton soldiers that were besieging me stopped immediately after hearing the noise. Then they all looked up to the left as if they could see something. I see. Zhang Han nodded his head and said, that sound should be made by the boat of curse. Boat of curse? Is it the one mentioned by the authorities, boss? You have seen it? Instructor Liu asked curiously. Well, I've seen it twice. With my current strength, I dare not explore it at will, Zhang Han replied. Hiss, it's terrible. Instructor Liu's facial expression changed into one of fear. It seems that the official warning is well founded. Everyone knows that the boss is a late-stage Grandmaster, but he dares not explore that ship. That ship, it's too terrible. I've seen that ship, too. Xian looked at Instructor Liu and said, it's very large in size, even twice as big as an aircraft carrier. They said it was 500 or 600 meters long and 100 meters high. The ship is all black with nothing in it, but it can fly. When the ship flew out of the sea, it broke the protective array of the relics, thus we were able to be here. Huh? Damn it, it's amazing. Instructor Liu imagined the picture described by Xian, and immediately shrank his neck in fear. If I'm right, the central area in front is actually a dead area, and the boat of curse would come here to look for food. This ship, which can detect the remains and come to forage by itself, is worth studying. Zhang Han's eyes narrowed slightly. There was no doubt that there were high-level things in the ship, maybe a king-level soul or other creatures. There was no danger without touching the hull, which meant that the creature was still sleeping. Go ahead, Zhang Han said, holding Xian's hand and walking forward. Instructor Liu followed them, looking left and right to keep alert. But he found that whenever a skeleton approached, it was directly turned into powder. Knowing that it was the boss who was beating a path, he was completely relieved. On the way, Zhang Han pointed out the direction to Instructor Liu and helped him get some Earth-grade treasures, which shocked the instructor. How is this possible? How could he find the treasures directly? It's like cheating in a game. Gradually, the fog became thicker, and the visibility was reduced from more than 60 meters to only 10 meters. The forest was all white. Zhang Han felt a bit dazed. It seemed that he had once been trapped in such a fog in his previous life. If he couldn't use his soul sense or some means, he might really be lost in this vast fog. In this way, after they walked forward in the fog for more than 10 minutes, Zhang Han's ears suddenly twitched as if he felt something, and then he accelerated his pace. At the same time, on the edge of the dead tree area, there was a flat ground without any fog. This flat land also extended far to the left and right sides, where nearly 100 people were gathered, many of whom were just coming out of the fog, and the number of people was still increasing. On the left, there were 2 groups of people confronting each other. There were more than 40 people on one side, and 90% of them were black. On the other side, there were 17 or 18 people from the Heavenly Talisman sect led by Mahdi. An old man with long hair was standing beside Mahdi and looking at the 3 black men leading the other side seriously. One of the 3 black leaders had no hair, and he was Fajira, a branch leader of the Evil Wind sect. The 2 standing next to him were his protectors. Fajira was a middle-stage Grandmaster close to the late stage, and both his protectors had also advanced to the Grandmaster middle stage 2 years ago. In contrast, Xuanhuan, one of the elders of the Heavenly Talisman sect who had just advanced to the middle stage, was under great pressure. Fajia, what do you mean by ambushing here? Xuanhuan asked aloud as he retreated. He was about 100 meters away from the dead tree area, so as long as he entered it, he would have a chance to escape. Fajira was a master majoring in spells, and he needed a few seconds to cast spells before each attack. Therefore, Xuanhuan wanted to extend the time as much as possible. If he was the only one who encountered Fajira, he could run away directly, but now there were more than 10 outstanding disciples of the sect behind him, and he was responsible for their safety. What do I mean? The Heavenly Talisman sect had stolen my treasures, and I warned you last time that you'd better not fall into my hands. It turns out that you're really unlucky. Faojia sneered and walked to the opposite side step by step. He knew Aoyuan's plan, so he was also paying attention to the distance between himself and the mist cluster. But so what? Anyone who tries to run away from me, Faojia, is dreaming. He planned to make these people despair when they saw hope, and then their expression would make him happy. With the improvement of his strength, he found that he was born to like killing, and he enjoyed the pleasure of darkness and blood. Don't talk nonsense. That treasure was in the ruins and didn't belong to anyone. Moreover, our 8th elder got it at the cost of his life, and we haven't investigated this matter yet. How dare you come back to bite us in such a vicious way? You're too unreasonable. Aoyuan frowned and said seriously, you are so fond of killing people. Do you know that there is always someone stronger than you? All murderers will be killed in the end. Aoyuan's words resonated with the crowd standing more than 50 meters away on both sides. They were very familiar with the background of both sides, and couldn't help talking about them. The evil wind sect is here to cause trouble again. Alas, the strength disparity is too big since there are 3 Grand Masters from the evil wind sect and only 1 from the heavenly talisman sect. According to the character of the branch leader, I'm afraid that all those from the heavenly talisman sect will be destroyed. The most important thing is that those masters have gone to the front central area. No one here can control the situation, let alone protect the heavenly talisman sect. There will probably be a massacre here. The disciples from the evil wind sect are so cruel after all. The discussions among the onlookers were all about the facts. In the martial arts world, there was indeed a group of people who liked to kill and regarded killing as their unique way of cultivation, and many of them had become evil legends of an era, but they generally couldn't live long without a strong backing. As there was always someone stronger, at any time, a more powerful martial artist might appear and easily kill them. However, when these discussions were heard by a man with a flat-top haircut who seemed to be about 25, he slightly frowned. Ha ha ha. Faojia laughed when he heard the words. Then he calmed down and stared at the people in front of him in a more vicious and cruel way. Only the weak can say that. You think you're invincible? Aoyuan was getting more and more angry, but he was also retreating faster. That was because he had a hunch that Faojia was going to attack him. Ma Dai's younger martial sister was almost scared to tears. The other disciples' faces were also pale, and there was even cold sweat on their foreheads. They were shaking with despair. What was going to happen was terrible. They had been learning how to draw and use talismans in their sect, and this was their first time coming out to practice their skills and toughen themselves. Under such circumstances, they were brave enough to not be too scared to stand up. At this time, Ma Dai's hands were shaking and his back was cold, but he knew that he had to stand in front of the younger martial brothers and sisters, so he put his hand behind his back and moved his fingers quickly to send signals to those behind him. Run. The crowd recoiled faster. Ha ha, surround them. Faojia sneered. At once, both protectors beside him moved to outflank the frightened disciples, trying to block their retreat. Aoyuan's face darkened, when he took a deep breath and was about to say something. Stop. Suddenly, a serious voice came from the crowd, and then a young man emerged from the onlookers on the right. He took only one step forward with seemingly slow movements, but suddenly, he appeared more than 30 meters away, just at the side of the two groups. Faojia's eyes met his icy gaze. Earth spells? Faojia got serious. The young man didn't hide his chi, and Faojia could sense that he was also a middle-stage grandmaster. But he was not afraid. Even if the other side had such a grandmaster helper, they could be evenly matched in strength with him at most. You have a helper. Faojia sneered. Is your evil wind sect going too far this time? The young man had an oval face, a well-proportioned figure, and looked a little childlike, but he was like a drawn sword surrounded by a powerful field of chi, and no one dared to look down upon him. Don't forget that you are in Singapore, he warned. Your evil wind sect cannot act recklessly and disparage everyone. Ha ha ha. Boy, we are in the relics and I can do whatever I like, you assume you, right? Even if your grandfather came here personally, I would not be merciful, let alone you. Boy, don't do something stupid, otherwise, after I kill them, it'll be your turn. Faojia looked at Sumu and knew which family he was from. Sumu didn't know how to retort, so he clenched his fist and said in a cold voice, if you want to fight, then let's fight. The chi around Sumu became stronger, indicating that he was about to launch an attack. You go and play with him. Faojia waved to his protectors. They rushed at Sumu at once. Sumu's spiritual force swept out like a wave. As he gently stamped his feet, all the sand and stones on the ground within 10 meters of the square were lifted up, and then shot at the attackers like bullets. However, the attack of the two guardians was not affected at all. The body of one protector vibrated for a while, and then began to show a light golden metallic cluster, while the other protector held a conch in his hand and began to absorb the sand and stones that were shot at him. The rest of the sand and stone hit the first protector, causing a thumping sound, just like the sound of knocking metal. Sumu's facial expression changed. Invulnerable body? For Sumu, such a grand master who had refined his body to be invulnerable was an unbeatable rival. He hadn't expected that one of the protectors was a grand master whose specialty was body refining. The two protectors soon arrived in front of Sumu, and with every move, they tried to kill the young man, which made him continue to retreat. The crowd watching the battle not far away couldn't help retreating and asking in fear, why is the top young martial artist in Singapore so vulnerable? Take care of your words. His opponent is not a young disciple, but an experienced grand master. The evil wind sect is so terrible and overbearing. When the onlookers were talking, all those from the heavenly talisman sect had retreated to a place only 30 meters away from the dead tree area behind. Suddenly, Faojia opened his hands and began to chant quickly in a low voice. In less than a second, everyone present felt that their life was being threatened. Suddenly, a faint light flashed in Faojia's eyes, and then black air masses as thick as his arms rushed out of his hands. They quickly moved forward on the left and right sides, ready to surround all those from the heavenly talisman sect. Xuanhuan's face changed, and suddenly, a blue talisman appeared in his right hand, being thrown forward by him at the air mass on the right. Xuanhuan's hands were raised horizontally, controlling this talisman, and continuously inputting his spiritual force into it, temporarily blocking the attack of the air mass on the right. But he was more and more desperate, because the light black air mass on the left was rapidly approaching him. However, he had no hand to resist it with. The two air masses were growing, trying to form a circle to surround him and his disciples. Once the two masses were connected, Faojia could cast a more terrifying spell. Xuanhuan's face paled, for he had never expected that the disparity between him and Faojia was so great. Just when he didn't know what to do, Mahdi, who was pale, turned back and shouted at the top of his voice, "Run! Run!" Then, with steely determination, Mahdi shook his hands, summoned 2 stacks of talismans and activated more than 30 of them at one time. The talismans flew out one by one, blocking the air mass on the left, but they were only a drop in the bucket and had no impact on the attack of the air mass. Without hesitation, Mahdi again activated dozens of talismans, and then rushed toward the snake-like air mass, controlling the talismans with both hands. He tried to input as much chi into them as he could, and the air mass was slowed down a little bit. Elder brother, eldest martial brother, the disciples of the heavenly talisman sect shouted with tears in their eyes, "Go!" Xuanhuan snapped, but as soon as he had given the order, he saw the air mass on the left break through the layers of talismans and rush toward Mahdi. It was a futile effort for a profound stage master to try and block a middle stage grand master. But his attitude and determination to protect his younger martial brothers and sisters moved them all. "Let me help you," Just when junior brother roared and was ready to rush up, boom! Ma Dai's last talisman defense was broken, and the snake-shaped air mass rushed at Ma Dai's chest like lightning. Ma Dai turned around, looked at his younger martial brother and younger martial sister, and smiled. Ah! Just when the younger martial sister let out a scream. Zoom! Suddenly, a semicircle shield of light appeared in front of Ma Dai, completely isolating the air mass. Faojia frowned and looked at the misty area. Even Xuanhuan noticed the abnormality and glanced back from the corner of the eye. His eyes were lit up with hope. Ouch! Ma Dai was stunned at first, then gave out a cry of fright. He collapsed to the ground, rolled back several meters, stood up with cold sweat on his forehead, looked left and right, took a deep breath of relief, and said with lingering fear, "Here comes our helper. I was scared to death just now, I almost died." His younger martial brother and younger martial sister were also cheered up, and they were all looking back in confusion. The dead tree area was still foggy, but everyone present had a strange feeling, as if there were some ancient beasts hidden in the forest. 1 second, 2 seconds, 5 seconds passed by. All of a sudden, swish, 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 5 black lights formed a fan and rushed at Faojia. Faojia stared at the light fan indifferently and stretched out his right palm. Suddenly, hundreds of thumb-length needles flew out of his sleeve. They connected and overlapped each other, forming a huge luminous net. Bang, bang, bang. Just like Ma Dai's talismans, Faojia's net was directly broken, and the 5 black lights rushed forward without slowing down. Faojia's pupils constricted in fear. He quickly stopped casting, and waved his hands after the 2 serpentine air masses dissipated. Suddenly, a wave of light appeared and surrounded him. However, whoosh! He heard a piercing sound. There were many thin lines of energy between the gaps of the 5 lights to connect them, and then the light in the front suddenly flashed. With the energy support of the other 4 lights, the first black light pierced Faojia's shield like a sword. When Faojia's defense work had been completed, the black light appeared within his protective cover. Faojia's eyes narrowed, reflecting the approaching black light. He felt as if time was no longer flowing. When he could see the black light clearly, he found it was just a black card. A card. As soon as he thought about it, he felt a chill in his chest, and then a fire seemed to be burning in his body, devouring his life. The card flew through his body and out of his back as if it were a peerless sword, but it was not tainted with blood. How? Faojia's eyes widened. He reached helplessly forward, as if to touch the enemy in the fog. Soon after, he couldn't breathe, and his mind kept replaying the words of Xuanhuan. There is always someone stronger than you, and all murderers will be killed in the end. So, is this because I deserve it? Blood came out of his eyes, but he was still holding his last breath, trying to wait to see who killed him. At the same time, Faojia's 2 protectors saw his tragic situation, and their faces changed. They hurriedly retreated and tried to rescue Faojia, but found that his breathing was getting weaker and weaker. The 2 men quickly retreated and returned to in front of their disciples behind, looking in the direction of the fog with great vigilance. Sumu breathed a sigh of relief. He was under too much pressure just now, and intended to escape after a few moves. Unexpectedly, such a strange thing happened. Is there a helper? Who is it? How could Faojia be killed so easily? He was frightened. In the dead silence, everyone looked in the direction of the fog. Damn it, we're going out at last. I'm so dizzy that I can't tell the direction. Are you dizzy, madam? Here is a bottle of mineral water. Do you want to drink? Suddenly, a cheerful voice came from the forest. ? The crowd was confused. What's going on? Isn't he quite different from a hero in one's imagination? On the other side, the 5 lights slowed down gradually, thus people could see that there were 5 black cards. The cards slowly flew back and became suspended in front of the fog. After seeing the cards clearly, Sumu suddenly thought of something and shouted, "It's him!" Su Mu hadn't expected that it was that fierce man who did it and that he could be so amazing. No wonder he is a grandmaster who could kill He Qingshan. He is so powerful. Su Mu couldn't help trembling inside. However, the others present were chewing his words in confusion. It's him? Who is he? Please make it clear. Suddenly, two faint figures appeared at the edge of the foggy area. They seemed to be a man and a woman. At the same time, a pleasant voice was heard. Who? We're finally coming out. It's a little stuffy here. Wait, have I ever heard this voice? Marty was stunned. But he soon widened his eyes in surprise. Ah, it's you. Marty screamed, but then he was shocked. You. He stared at the two people and the 5 cards floating in front of them. Damn it, a grandmaster. How could things develop like this? I've been boasting in front of a grandmaster? Marty was at a loss. What are they doing? Why are they all looking at us? Xian blinked and whispered in Zhang Han's ear. What are you looking at? Instructor Liu scratched his head and held the treasures in his arms with greater strength. They were fighting just now. Zhang Han looked at Xian and chuckled. He was still talking and laughing, as if he had just accidentally killed an ant, rather than a martial arts master. Faojia stared at Zhang Han, exhaled his last breath, and fell to the ground. Xian and Instructor Liu felt the unusual atmosphere and stopped talking. Everyone's eyes were focused on Zhang Han. They were shocked deep inside. Who is he? Such a young man killed Faojia. Junior brother Lu and the other survivors of the Heavenly Talisman sect were too shocked to think. Aren't they the two people we met before? How powerful he is. Thank you for saving us, young hero. Aoyuan, the elder of the Heavenly Talisman sect, bowed to Zhang Han and saluted him while speaking in a loud voice. At this time, Zhang Han merely glimpsed at him calmly and did not give any response. Well. Marty made an obeisance in hesitation, not knowing what to say. Zhang Han gave him a faint smile and said, You left in a hurry, and I had no chance to thank you. Your talismans are not bad and are convenient to use. Ah, really? Ha ha. Marty blushed, rambling in his response. I'm so embarrassed. How dare I give talismans to a Wudao grandmaster and advise them to stay in a safe place? Oh. Zhang Han then took Xian's hand and walked forward, as if he were just passing by. Instructor Liu followed them, looked at the crowd, and touched the natural precious materials hidden in his arms. See, great trees are good for shade, and my backing is so strong. Chapter 446, Snatching Food from the Jaws of a Tiger. At that moment, the eyes of nearly 100 people around him were all focused on Zhang Han. Those who could see his expression clearly noticed that he had been calm or even expressionless all the time. He acted as if he was really passing by, and it was not him who had just killed the famous Faojia. The onlookers couldn't help but gasp in astonishment. Su Mu, in particular, was staring at Zhang Han and feeling depressed. He is a real talent, and I'm so much worse than him. He is so powerful. If it were him, he could only resist the quirky attack just now for 3 times at most, and then he would be defeated by Faojia. Under everyone's gaze, the 5 cards approached Zhang Han and were about to fly into his pocket. Suddenly, one of Faojia's protectors changed his face and paid obeisance. Then he said in stilted Chinese, Since you dare to interfere in the affairs of the Evil Wind sect and kill our branch leader, you must not be a nobody. Dare you tell your name? Hearing his words, Zhang Han paused. Xian took a look at the fierce-looking man, so she hugged Zhang Han with more strength. He is so fierce. Behind them, Instructor Liu turned around, looked at the black man up and down, and raised his eyebrows. What? Do you want to get revenge? Do you want me to shoot you now? The protector frowned. What are you, a greenhorn in chi strength stage? Saying? On the other side, Su Mu's face darkened, and his eyes flashed, indicating that he wanted to kill all these from the Evil Wind sect. Even Aoyuan looked at Zhang Han with the same intention. However, He didn't know whether he could manage it, as the two protectors were vigilant and would immediately flee once there was a sign of trouble. Nobody noticed that the 5 cards did not fly back to Zhang Han's pocket. Instead, the rest of the cards in his pocket flew out and disappeared underground along with Zhang Han's legs. Under the crowd's gaze, Zhang Han took a glance at the protector calmly. "Remember my name, Zhang Han Yang." After that, he turned around and continued to walk with Xian. Instructor Liu thought they were going to leave, so he looked at the protectors fiercely and made a contemptuous gesture at them. "Behave yourself." Then Instructor Liu followed Zhang Han and left, feeling elated. "It's so comfortable to have backing. I can point to a master's nose and scold him. Ha ha." One of the protectors smiled grimly, but at the next instant, he was stunned, and his eyes were filled with blood. If one looked closely, they would find that a ferocious dragon seemed to be passing through his pupils. Su Mu suddenly looked at the two protectors with full attention, because he felt that the energy within the two protectors was restless just now, and then their vitality began to dissipate. Xuanhuan was also aware of this, and now he was looking at the left in surprise. What happened? Except for them, the others were looking at the back of Zhang Han and his companions. Plop. Suddenly, a dull sound came from the left side, attracting their eyes. When they looked in that direction, they saw a scene they would never forget. Plop, plop. The two protectors of the evil wind sect fell into the ground, followed by all the disciples behind them. At the same time, 18 cards came out of the ground and began to circle in the air. Their dark lines made everyone tremble with fear. Then, the 18 cards slowly caught up with Zhang Han and disappeared into his pocket. Hiss. Su Mu's face changed greatly, his body trembled slightly, and he took a breath of cool air. "What method did you use? He's amazing. How was that possible?" He couldn't understand how Zhang Han had launched the attack and why there had been no signs. My gosh! Xuanhuan was stunned. While looking at Zhang Han's back, he shivered involuntarily. "I'm glad he and I are not enemies, otherwise, it would be terrible." The other bystanders in the distance were also stunned and kept gasping in astonishment. "Zhang Han Yang, he is fierce Zhang. Is he still a human being? He is so powerful. I was almost scared to death." Faojiu dared to threaten fierce Zhang. Su Mu's pupils constricted as he murmured. "He brought this all on himself. This is the style of a master." Junior brother Lu shivered and looked at Zhang Han's back with an adoring expression. "Can I reach his height someday in the future? Oh, I just walked with such a powerful man." The younger martial sister said in surprise and excitement, "They have talked with us. I didn't expect that he is so amazing." Alas! Mahdi sighed. "Eldest brother, why are you sighing?" asked a disciple in surprise. "I've been doubting that heroes saving beauties can't be a simple story. He is a martial arts grandmaster while I'm just at profound stage. I've just saved a beauty but ended up being called a busybody, and it turned out that she was an earth stage master. Why am I so unlucky? When will I save a beauty and win her heart?" Mahdi continued sighing. "Eldest brother," the younger martial sister said with a smile, "you have just saved all of us, and you are so handsome. Alas, is it useful to save you?" Mahdi curled his lips and looked at the couple that had left enviously. He saved a beauty and immediately won her heart. They are now lovers and decided to stay together forever. "They'll be together forever," he said. The younger martial sister blushed and said shyly, "Then, you can win my heart." "Oh, forget it. Rabbits don't eat grass beside their nests, and I dare not have a try." Mahdi widened his eyes in astonishment and waved his hands to reject the girl. "If our master knew of this, it would be terrible." "Ha ha, you can only boast, eldest brother." Junior brother Lu laughed. The other disciples burst out laughing too, for they knew their eldest brother very well. Though Mahdi was uninhibited in expressing his opinions, he was, in fact, a man of integrity who had been dreaming of becoming a great hero. "Who told you that he saved a beauty and then won her heart?" Su Mu took a glance at Mahdi. "Well, she said it herself. replied Marty in confusion. Sumu was stunned. Then he shook his head and gave Marty a meaningful smile without saying anything. Xuanhuan pondered, looked at Marty, and said, "Watch what you say. They are Grandmaster Zhang and Mrs. Zhang, and they have a daughter. I heard that Master Zhang dotes on his wife and daughter. They were just messing with you." "Ah?" Marty was stunned, and then his eyes lit up within 2 seconds. "Ha ha ha, so he didn't save the beauty? I still have a chance. One day I will surely save a beautiful woman. Let's go and have a look. The central area is not far ahead," said Xuanhuan said while taking the lead. The onlookers did not hesitate to follow him. They walked on for about 20 minutes. The most central area could be seen clearly. This was a big lake, and its water was black, which made people feel depressed and scared. Zhang Han and his companions were standing on the top of a cliff more than 300 meters high. The mountain walls on both sides of the cliff extended infinitely, and there was no way to the opposite side. Fortunately, the cliff was not completely vertical, and martial artists at or above the peak strength stage could safely go down to its bottom. Xian looked at the lake and said, "The area here is too large, and the lake is black, it's scary." Zhang Han checked the lake and replied, "It's not a lake but a ghost swamp." "Ah, ghost swamp?" Instructor Liu was startled. He rubbed his eyes, but still couldn't see what was underneath. He could only see a lot of faint figures on the ground around the black swamp. "What is a ghost? A kind of monster that's really scary?" asked Xian in a low voice. "Ghost is a kind of yin soul, which can directly hurt people's souls, but their range of activities is limited, and they have to depend on a dead place to survive, such as the swamp below. They can only move on the swamp and can't come out, so those people dare to stand near the swamp," explained Zhang Han. Then he stretched his right hand to hold Xian's slender waist and added, "Let's go down and have a look. The ghost swamp is not frightening." After that, Zhang Han jumped down with Xian in his arms. Every time he touched the cliff with his tiptoe, he would float down for tens of meters, and then repeat this series of actions. In this way, he fell to the bottom of the cliff very smoothly. "Boss, why don't you give me a ride? I have so many spiritual herbs on my back." When Instructor Liu found out that Zhang Han was going to jump down, he applied for a free ride. However, the outcome was not as good as he expected. "Alas, I'd better rely on myself." Instructor Liu mumbled, turned sideways, and rushed down. Different from Zhang Han, as he fell, he kept pushing his feet to the mountain wall to increase the friction. When they got to the bottom of the cliff, they saw many people surrounding the swamp. Due to the swamp's vast area, only about 100 people were standing near them, far away from other groups. They found Wang Ming, Zihu, and Zhao Feng, as well as a few familiar people in the crowd on the left. Seeing Zhang Han and Xian, the companions, who hadn't seen each other for a while, ran to them. Zhao Feng, after seeing this, Instructor Liu rushed to the crowd. As he said hello, he patted the herbs on his back and said, "Well, let's see what we've got. Why didn't you find anything?" "Well, I also picked up some treasures, but not as much as yours." Zhao Feng grinned. "Where are they?" Instructor Liu looked around and found no trace of the treasures. "In Uncle Hu's storage ring. Do you want to store yours in it?" replied Zhao Feng. "Oh, no, I can carry them on my back. It's okay." Instructor Liu shook his head. With these treasures on his back, he could attract most people's eyes. Then those people would see his boss and know that he had a super backer. The envious eyes of others always made Instructor Liu ecstatic. "Mr. Zhang." Zihu greeted Zhang Han with a smile. Though according to their position in the family hierarchy, he could call Zhang Han Han, both he and Zilong thought Zhang Han was powerful. It was not easy to practice martial arts to such a degree, so they must show respect to him. Therefore, they kept calling Zhang Han, Mr. Zhang. Xian looked at them as asked, "Uncle Hu, Uncle, how long have you been here?" Zihu shook his head and said, "We've been here for 2 hours. But we have no way for further exploration. We can sense the treasures in the swamp, but we can't get them. Now we're waiting for the time to run out so that we can be automatically sent out of this relic. So many ghosts. Xian looked at the edge of the marsh not far away, where there were countless translucent human-shaped ghosts. She could even vaguely see them reaching out to the outside, trying to touch the people on the shore. It was a little scary because there were so many ghosts in the swamp, covering the whole surface, and it looked like the swamp was made up of ghosts. As far as this situation is concerned, I'm afraid no one can enter the swamp. All the precious natural materials must be under the swamp, but we can't stay on the surface of the swamp, let alone under it. Zihu shook his head helplessly. Besides, the swamp is too big for treasure hunting. Wang Ming sighed. Hasn't that boat appeared yet? Asked Zhang Han. Ship, I didn't see it. But just now. When Zihu was about to say something, wee-oo, 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 all of a sudden, from a distance, came a dull, metallic friction sound, echoing in everyone's mind. The people on that side hurriedly looked up and saw a massive bow on the edge of the cliff hundreds of meters away on the right. Zoom. Accompanied by the noise, the whole boat slowly appeared in front of the crowd. When the stern left the cliff's edge, the entire boat floated in the air and slowly landed at the bottom of the cliff. Zhang Han suddenly felt that the stern of the boat seemed to vibrate for a while, just like a big fish swinging its tail slightly. He didn't know if it was in his imagination. Dozens of people behind him were stunned. Oh, it's so big. This is the boat of curse. My gosh, are we too close to it? It's weird, it's terrible. I feel scared when I look at it. Discussions broke out from the back. Many people standing at the edge of the marsh in the distance arrived there, including many martial arts grandmasters such as Su Long, Wang Zanzong, and thousands of chi strength masters. They all wanted to see what was happening there. Due to the hull's large size, people could see it from very far away. However, upon closely observing it, they would feel more shocked. The giant boat slowly landed from the top of the cliff, like a mountain pressing towards the bottom of the cliff, suffocating everyone present. Under the crowd's gaze, the huge boat slowly fell on the edge of the swamp and slowly moved towards the middle of the swamp. Suddenly, the scene above the swamp changed. Where the giant boat passed, the ghosts within a kilometer turned into a cluster of light and flew into the boat, as if they had never appeared. Thus, a gap appeared in the ghost barrier above the swamp. Damn it, the ship is eating ghosts. Instructor Liu was stunned. It's here to find food. Zhang Han narrowed his eyes slightly, when the boat was hundreds of meters away. He put his arm around Xian's waist. Let's go and have a look. With that, he went forward. Xian was not afraid at all, because she knew that Zhang Han was willing to take her there, indicating that he could absolutely guarantee their safety. If she saw so many ghosts in the real world, she would be scared to scream, but now, there was a guardian beside her, thus, she was full of expectations for the new exploration. When they reached the edge of the swamp, the flood dragon card flew out of Zhang Han's jacket pocket and landed at their feet. Clatter, clatter. A small piece of light blue tangible energy spread out at their feet, like a water film attached to the swamp. Zhang Han and Xian stepped on it, rode the wind and waves, and floated towards the direction of the boat. After them, Zihu thought for a moment, summoned a wooden sword, and threw it forward. The wooden sword began floating on the swamp with Zihu stepping on it like a legendary sword immortal. Ao Yuan also rushed to the swamp from behind. Seeing this, he summoned a piece of golden talisman, which turned into a 3-meter-long raft of energy. He stepped on it and navigated forward slowly. About 10 minutes later, Su Long, Wang Zanzong, and the others also arrived at the swamp. They all used their unique skills to enter the swamp area and kept up with the pace of the previous few people. While Zhang Han had been following the boat 30 meters behind it, the other people were not as bold as him. They were all observing the boat 100 meters behind it. Wang Zanzong and other skilled people were braver as they had been communicating with each other 5 or 6 meters away from Zhang Han. However, Zhang Han didn't give them any answers. He didn't know what the giant boat was going to do, either. In this way, they navigated forward for about an hour and reached the center of the swamp. At that moment, a sudden change occurred. Zoom, zoom, zoom. The boat suddenly rose up, spun in the air, and then headed down into the swamp. What is this? Su Long's pupils contracted in surprise, and he quickly stepped back tens of meters. He had felt some energy pressure from the big boat. Wang, Xuanhuan and others also retreated tens of meters when they saw it. In the face of such a change, they dared not be careless. Zhang Han still stopped at the same place, and the light membrane slowly flowed under his and Xian's feet. The boat is about to crash down. Xian shrunk her neck and held Zhang Han's arm tightly. It doesn't matter, it's an unconscious act of the boat. If it really hits the swamp, the ruins will disappear, but I don't know if it will do this," replied Zhang Han. He suddenly stopped talking, looked around carefully, and sniffed. He smelled treasures. This huge boat was going to suck away the treasures there. All of a sudden, kaboom! Suddenly, a dull, heartbeat-like sound reverberated throughout the boat. Many lights burst out of the swamp and flew like lightning to the giant ship. Su Long looked at them carefully and said in surprise, "They are all heaven-stage treasures." There were 21 lights in total, all rising from the center of the swamp and rushing to the great ship. At a glance, Zhang Han could tell the quality of these treasures. However, he didn't care about them. He kept staring at the distance 100 meters away from his right front. The treasure smell there was the most intense. Fourth stage spirit treasure. Zhang Han held Xian in his arms with his left hand, while his eyes were shining with blue light. "It's coming." Suddenly, Zhang Han raised his eyebrows. He saw a blue flame as thick as his thigh, 5 meters long, coming out of the swamp. Fourth stage blue serene bamboo. Zhang Han pushed his right palm forward, drove his inner spiritual force to move at full speed, and made an amazing move. Hand of earth-killing intent. Suddenly, with the movement of Zhang Han's palm, a giant palm of 7 or 8 meters high appeared in the air. The palm was covered with a light black layer of gas, which was constantly turning. He is trying to snatch food from the jaws of a tiger? Su Long was shocked, for he didn't expect Zhang Han to be so bold. Hiss, it's terrible. Other people were scared, too. Under their gazes, that giant palm grasped the blue serene bamboo. Then, it reached 10 meters ahead to grasp another cluster of light, which was a heaven-stage treasure. With the giant palm suddenly pulled back, the connection between the treasure and the hull seemed to break. The two treasures slowly floated to Zhang Han. At the same time, the giant boat finally had some reaction. A wisp of dark smoke came out of the boat, like a hand, rushing towards Zhang Han's position, trying to catch him. Chapter 447, The Fourth Stage Blue Serene Bamboo. It's terrible, it's attacking him. Su Long's face changed as he felt great force and pressure from the dark fog. To his horror, he found that the mist was just the tip of the iceberg of the giant boat's power. It was just its instinctive primary attack response. What the hell is it? Wang Zanping narrowed his eyes in fear. He summoned the mountains and rivers flag and began to chant. Suddenly, the mountains and rivers flag fluttered without wind, sending out countless rays of light, and formed a golden shield 20 meters in front of Zhang Han and Xian. They all knew that the giant boat's attribute was yin, so he used the guardian array with the attribute of yang. Unexpectedly, when the fog touched the light shield, it seemed to open its mouth and absorb the array within seconds. At that moment, only 3 meters were separating Zhang Han, the blue serene bamboo, as well as the other treasure. The two sides seemed to be in a tug-of-war. Zhang Han wanted to keep the treasures, while the giant boat's unconscious energy was absorbing it. "Interesting," said Zhang Han. His eyes began to flash, while his right hand suddenly moved forward. Zhang Han gathered the soul sense in his soul sense sea and more than half of his inner spiritual force into his palm, while his right finger scurried, making a casting gesture. King Ming seal. Streams of energy continuously converged in front of Zhang Han's body, forming a glowing seal 5 meters away. The pattern on it was like a complex traditional Chinese character, as well as a strange picture. All the people present felt their souls trembling. What's this move? Su Long's face froze. Are the palm that just appeared, and this seal all secret skills, which are extremely treasured, or are they supernatural powers created by Zhang Han himself? It's so terrifying. The more Su Long thought about it, the more he feared it. In the face of a person with countless skills and means, no one was willing to be their enemy. Nowadays, many martial arts masters were famous all over the world. However, their secret skills and supernatural powers, such as the 5-tiger fist, which had boosted Su Long's reputation in Singapore, were no longer secret. However, in the face of Zhang Han, he just wanted to praise him. He is unfathomable. As soon as the King Ming seal appeared, it radiated dazzling green light and flew forward. The fog, as thick as a bucket, seemed to feel this terrible power. It stopped, hesitated for a moment, and shrank back. Zoom, zoom, zoom. Although it was not so smooth, the hull fell down continuously and did not stop. Just after Zhang Han snatched the blue serene bamboo, the boat made a buzzing sound. Clatter, clatter. All the ghosts within 3,000 meters turned into countless clusters of black lights, converging into the giant boat from all directions. Bang! The boat's front plunged into the swamp. Under everyone's gaze, the boat slowly disappeared, as if it had been swallowed by the swamp. With a wave of Zhang Han's hand, the seal hanging in the air in front of him dissipated slowly. Looking at the place where the giant boat disappeared, he felt something interesting. It's a treasure boat, and there must be lots of treasures in it. The boat could directly break through the relics and reach the center to suck the higher-level treasures into its body, which proved that it was a treasure boat. They had only witnessed this process once and did not know how many times it had happened before. But it could be inferred that the longer the history of the giant boat was, the more treasures there were. Unfortunately, Zhang Han didn't know what creature was sleeping in the boat. Even a wisp of chi the creature released could force Zhang Han to exert all his strength when using the King Ming seal. Hence, it must be mighty. At least, at this stage, Zhang Han dared not provoke it casually. The King Ming seal was a soul sense secret skill, and only under the control of soul sense could it fully display its power. However, presently, Zhang Han's soul sense contained less than half of his original soul sense. Thus, he had to activate the skill with his spiritual force, which significantly reduced the King Ming seal's ability. My strength is still too weak, and many of my skills cannot be used. Zhang Han shook his head slightly and decided not to think about it anymore. Anyway, as long as the boat was still on Earth, one day, he would go to explore it. He turned his eyes to the front, where the huge dark palms were slowly disappearing and revealing the treasures wrapped inside. The first was the blue serene bamboo. Blue serene bamboo was an aggressive spirit treasure. No matter where it grew, it would absorb the energy of all the plants around it, but once it met a stronger plant, it would give everything to it. The red one Zhang Han had obtained last time was of poor quality compared with this one, which was dark blue, 5 meters high, and looked like a flame as a whole. According to Zhang Han's appraisal, this kind of blue serene bamboo was a rare 4th-stage spirit treasure. The other 3rd-stage spirit treasure was a palm-sized Xuanhuan void gold, which hadn't been refined by anyone. Xuanhuan void gold was one of the raw materials of the 18 cards in Zhang Han's pocket. It was a kind of memory metal born at the level of 2nd stage, which could store energy. Another characteristic of it was its beauty, for it was similar to diamonds and had high transparency. Xuanhuan void gold had different colors, and this one was pink. Zhang Han decided to make Xian a necklace worthy of being a gift. Zhang Han had never forgotten that he had broken Xian's last necklace and had promised to give her the best one. Although Xuanhuan void gold was valuable, it was not the best yet, but there were no more suitable materials now. So Zhang Han decided to use it to make a temporary necklace first. Holy object, this. Following Zhang Han, Su Long was stunned and looked at him enviously. At the same time, he admired the brave Zhang Han, who dared to seize the holy object at the risk of his life when facing the monster boat. Even more, it's really a combination of crisis and opportunity. Another holy object. Han's treasures are increasing, murmured Wang Ming. Wang Ming was confused. Looking left and right, he was wondering if Grandmaster Zhang had lots of treasures. Zhang Han turned his head and suggested, "Let's go out first." Then he waved to summon the blue serene bamboo and Xuanhuan void gold to him. As soon as he grasped the blue serene bamboo, bang! A great roar resounded through the ruins and reverberated in everyone's minds. In less than a second, the whole area became foggy. In the blink of an eye, the scene changed completely. The crowd had returned to the Dark Wind Island. Everyone was randomly transported to all parts of the island. They looked around and rushed to the entrance of the ruins. Zhang Han and Xian were lucky enough to be transported to the beach more than 300 meters away from the entrance of the ruins. Xian looked at the moon in the sky and the direction of the Dark Wind Island. "Were we sent out?" she asked in confusion. Zhang Han chuckled and explained, "Yes, because I got the blue serene bamboo, a fourth stage spirit treasure. It's the most valuable treasure in the ruins. The diamond in your hand is so big." Xian blinked her beautiful eyes. Obviously, she was more interested in the Xuanhuan void gold than the blue serene bamboo. Xuanhuan void gold is much more precious than diamonds. Zhang Han handed the Xuanhuan void gold to Xian, but he didn't tell Xian his plan. Instead, he was going to refine the necklace secretly and send it to her as a surprise. "What's its level?" asked Xian curiously. "It's a third stage spirit treasure and can be used as weapon material." As soon as Zhang Han replied, he heard someone calling him from the side. "Boss, boss." Zhang Han looked around and saw Instructor Liu coming from the edge of the forest. The scene seemed familiar, but this time no one was chasing Instructor Liu, and he wasn't yelling that crap anymore. "Oh, boss, I was just scared to death. As soon as I came out, there were more than 20 people around me. If I didn't react and run quickly, maybe they would have already robbed all my treasures," said Instructor Liu breathlessly. With that, he proudly patted the herb circle around his neck and said, "Boss, I have brought so many treasures out. Is there any reward for me?" "What reward do you want?" asked Zhang Han, feeling a little funny. "Well, can I have 3 pigs?" whispered Instructor Liu, looking carefully at Zhang Han to see if he would agree. "Ha ha." Xian couldn't help laughing. Blinking her big eyes, she said, "You only know what and how to eat. Ha ha, this is my hobby. A beautiful life is to have some meat and wine." Instructor Liu was shaking his head from side to side. Xian coughed and said, "I heard that you couldn't control yourself well when you are drunk." "Ah, I didn't lift the table last time." "Who said that? How can it be?" Instructor Liu smiled awkwardly and looked at the blue serene bamboo in Zhang Han's hand. "Well, boss, you've got a treasure too? Is it heavy? Shall I carry it for you?" "Catch." Zhang Han handed the blue serene bamboo to him. "Wow, it's like fire, very beautiful. Is it over 50 kilograms?" Instructor Liu took it over and carried it on his shoulder. Then he patted the blue serene bamboo, which was as thick as his arm, and asked curiously, "Boss, what grade is it?" "It's a holy object." "Ouch, what is it?" Instructor Liu was so scared that he almost fell down. While staring at the blue serene bamboo in shock, he shouted, "My gosh, it's a holy object, boss. Will it be broken accidentally? I'm a little scared." "Boss, take it back." Instructor Liu felt that his body was a little stiff, and he dared not move anymore. "Don't worry, even if you use it as a weapon, it can't be broken," replied Zhang Han. "Alas." Instructor Liu heaved a sigh of relief, clapped his chest, and said, "Then I'll rest assured. Let's go back to the ship first." Zhang Han held Xian's hand, and they led the way to walk on unhurriedly. Instructor Liu followed them and attracted the attention of all passers-by. Why does this man have so many precious natural materials? Suddenly, Instructor Liu saw Ahu not far ahead. Ahu was also carrying some precious natural materials, but they could only wrap around his waist, which made Instructor Liu prouder. Wow, Ahu, you only obtained such little treasure in this heritage exploration? What's the difference between this and going home empty-handed? Instructor Liu teased him. Dozens of people nearby were almost unable to stabilize themselves when they heard those words. Looking at their empty pockets, they didn't know what to say. It says who will go home empty-handed. Instructor Liu, you are amazing. How did you get so many treasures? Asked Ahu in shock. Of course I am. Instructor Liu curled his lip proudly and patted the blue serene bamboo with his right hand. Bang, bang, bang. Everyone in a 50 meters radius heard three dull sounds. They were all curious. What are you doing? Are these treasures worth showing off in this way? Don't your hands hurt when you bait this bamboo with such great force? Instead of looking at the onlookers, Instructor Liu stared at Ahu and said in a loud voice, do you know what it is? What's this? Asked Ahu full of doubt. Ha 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 ha. Instructor Liu raised his head and laughed. He didn't answer Ahu. Those who were paying attention to his every move felt more confused. Why are you laughing? His triumphant laughter made Xian laugh happily. So what is it? Asked Ahu loudly. Holy object. This time, Instructor Liu stopped playing tricks and almost shouted out. His voice was loud enough to be heard by anyone within 100 meters. All of a sudden, puff. What? Holy object? Is it true? There were even some faint gasps of surprise. Damn it, isn't that man fierce Zhang? This man is his subordinate. No wonder there are so many treasures hanging on him. But how did he obtain the holy object? A lot of people looked at Zhang Han and Instructor Liu in surprise, doubting whether it was true. But just then, someone began laughing in the distance. Everyone looked around and saw that Su Long was approaching them. With every step he took, he appeared 10 meters closer, and it took him only several steps to reach Zhang Han. Then Su Long paid obeisance and said courteously, Master Zhang, congratulations on getting the holy objects. Many people had witnessed the process of Zhang Han getting the blue serene bamboo, and the news would soon be spread. Thus, Su Long didn't need to help Zhang Han hide it. Instead, he congratulated Zhang Han in public. Thank you. Zhang Han nodded, took Xian's hand, and jumped into the sea. They walked on the sea and returned to the yacht 50 meters away. Ha ha ha, Sir Su, have you seen it? It's a holy object. Instructor Liu tapped the blue serene bamboo with great force, and proudly showed it off to Su Long. Then he said, I'm leaving, too. After that, he moved, ran 50 meters on the sea, and got on the yacht easily. Ahu followed him and quickly boarded the yacht. Everyone around looked at Instructor Liu in surprise. It's a holy object. How dare he pat it with such great force? What if he breaks it? Su Long couldn't help but let the corners of his mouth twitch. He really envied that Instructor Liu could show off like that, and he admitted that he was very jealous. Ahu had known all about Instructor Liu for a long time, and also knew that it was because Instructor Liu had gone to negotiate with the relevant departments that their dozen armed helicopters had been allowed to enter Singapore's airspace. Ahu was aware of the relationship between Instructor Liu and leading cadre Liu, but he didn't envy him. What he envied was that Instructor Liu was a subordinate of Zhang Han. This meant that he would encounter fewer setbacks in the future. Ahu recalled the days when he had been struggling alone, when he could only grope for the way to become a warrior, which was too hard for him. Step by step, soon, Zhao Feng, Wang Zanzong, and Wang Ming returned one after another. Every time he saw a friend, Instructor Liu would pat the blue serene bamboo and say, do you know what this is? However, Wang Zanzong was amused and said, I was standing next to him, don't I know? Instructor Liu was rendered speechless. Then, He turned his eyes, ran to the other side quickly, and continued to pack the bamboo. Although you already know, there will always be someone who doesn't know. When all the crew arrived, their yacht took the lead to leave and head back. At this time, along the coast, Su Long, Su Mu, Ao Yuan, Mardi, and other people were standing together and seeing the yacht off. Grandpa, Grandmaster Zhang is really amazing, I'm convinced, said Su Mu in a low voice. Su Long knew that Zhang Han had killed someone in the ruins, but he didn't comment more on it. Instead, he was a little envious of the good luck of the Heavenly Talisman sect's disciples. He also felt that Zhang Han's character was more and more unpredictable. He was very gentle to his family but cruel to his enemies. He was used to killing most of his enemies, but he often helped strangers in need. Zhang Han might not have a fixed personality, but he could do whatever he wanted and be a real free man. After hearing Su Mu's words, Su Long smiled and shook his head, saying, "You once said that you wanted to compete with Master Zhang. Haven't you realized the strength gap between you now? Although you are not as powerful as him, you still have a long way to go, and will certainly become a famous master in the future. Then, what can he become?" Su Mu's eyes followed that yacht, which was farther and farther away. He? Su Long shook his head slightly and stopped talking. 3 seconds later, he gave his answer. He is destined to become a legend. Legend? Su Mu was stunned and didn't know what he was thinking. At the same time, Ao Yuan, Mardi, Junior Brother Lu, and others were also silently repeating those words. Legend? Yes, a legend. Ao Yuan paid her obeisance and asked, "Thank you for your help, Mr. Su. What is Grandmaster Zhang's purpose for coming to Singapore? He and Xian will be engaged the day after tomorrow." "The 19th, replied Su Long. "Thank you for your information." Ao Yuan nodded, and then he remained silent again. In order to ensure everyone's safety, Su Long and other members of the spirit group did not leave until those on the Dark Wind Island left one after another. Zhang Han's yacht was the first to ride the wind and break the waves, followed by many yachts running side by side. It looked like he was being chased by a large group of yachts. More than an hour later, they returned to the port and got on their cars. At 5 o'clock in the afternoon, they returned to the Zimana. When they returned, Instructor Liu asked in a hurry, "Boss, where should I put these things?" Zhang Han said casually, "Please help me to keep them." "Well, though with the holy object in my hand, I'll get everything I want. What if I lost it?" Instructor Liu grinned. This was a holy object, and if there was any accident during his custody, he would be distressed. "You can store it in my mountains and rivers flag." Wang Zanping smiled. He held out his hand and summoned the mountains and rivers flag. With a flash of light, all those precious natural materials scattered on the ground were absorbed by the flag. Mountains and rivers flag had been refined by Wang Zanping and could be turned into a tattoo on his body. At the same time, the flag was also a storage tool, a holy object. "Then I'll rest assured." Instructor Liu took off all his load and went to bed happily. Zhang Han and Xian went back to their bedroom slowly, opened the door, and heard a snore. They saw Ziqiang and Xuanhuan lying on the quilt, covered with blankets. Ziqiang was on the right side, and Xuanhuan was in the middle. Ziqiang was still snoring, but Xuanhuan opened her eyes when they opened the door. "You are back." Xuanhuan sat up and woke up Ziqiang. "Ah, you are back." Ziqiang was still a little dizzy. "What time is it?" "It's 5 o'clock. Why are you so late? Go to sleep." After greeting them, Ziqiang and Xuanhuan returned to their own bedroom. Zhang Han and Xian changed into pajamas and went to bed. Xian was not sleepy yet. She lied in Zhang Han's arms and blinked her eyes, feeling as if her experience tonight was a dream. It was a wonderful experience. "Good night." Zhang Han smiled, kissed Xian's forehead, and patted her soft shoulder. Soon, Xian fell asleep. Zhang Han didn't want to sleep at all. He was thinking about how much Xuan void gold he needed to refine the necklace pendant. In order to make the necklace beautiful, he couldn't use all the Xuanhuan void gold, or the pendant would be too big and ugly. But he couldn't make the pendant too small, either. Therefore, he should make a pendant as long as his thumb, and the most important thing was to choose the shape of the pendant. In that way, Zhang Han lay in bed thinking. Just when he determined the shape of the pendant, the little princess beside him began to kick the blanket. When Zhang Han was about to cover Meng again with her blanket, the latter opened her eyes. "Papa, I just had a dream." Chapter 448, Instruction. "What kind of dream did you have?" Zhang Han gave Meng a soft smile and touched her head. "I dreamed that I could fly. I suddenly flew up, and I could also fly with Papa and Mama. I suddenly flew up, I flew high." Meng held out her small hands as she spoke, trying to demonstrate the scene in her dream. Zhang Han was amused by the cute girl. "Then wait for Dad to fly with you in the sky." Traveling in the sky and the earth was the dream of every greenhorn cultivator in the cultivation world. To be able to fly meant to take the initiative in battle, whether it was fighting or escaping. The flying ability allowed one to use more means and skills, such as flying with the help of special tools or flying with pure spiritual force. Flying with magic weapons could save a lot of power consumption. By contrast, flying with tools would save more spiritual force. It was said that all cultivators below the stage of innateness were equal to ordinary people, which had something to do with their ability to fly. Because only when a cultivator reached the stage of innateness could he break the limitation of natural laws and travel to the sky and the earth with his own strength. The innateness stage was the real beginning of cultivation, during which period the skills a cultivator could use would change a lot. Zhang Han had thought that it would take him 5 years to reach the innateness stage with the Thunder Yang Wood's help. However, he had obtained a 4th stage blue serene bamboo today, and it would significantly shorten the Thunder Yang Wood's maturation time. As long as he reached the innateness stage, Zhang Han was confident that he would break all obstacles and eliminate all adverse factors when the Cultivation World opened. Meng was pleased with Zhang Han's words. Looking back with her blinking eyes, she noticed Xian. "Mama again doesn't want to get up. Shall we wake her up?" Zhang Han chuckled. "Don't do it now. Mum had just slept for a short while. Follow Dad to clean yourself first, and you can play with your toys after breakfast." "Well, let's go." Meng got up and was ready to get out of bed. Zhang Han gently got out of bed and tucked up Xian, then he put on his clothes, changed Meng's clothes, and took her to the bathroom. As soon as they got downstairs, they heard a noise in the kitchen. "Are Grandpa and Grandma are cooking? I'll take a look." Meng jumped to the kitchen door and looked inside. "Grandpa and Grandma." Meng's clear and melodious voice came into the kitchen. Meng got up. Xuanhuan looked back and smiled, then she hung her apron aside and washed her hands. "We'll have breakfast in 10 minutes. Zhang also turned back and said with a smile, "Grandpa specially made egg tarts for you." "Egg tarts, thank you, Grandpa," said Meng happily. "Ha ha ha ha." Zhang laughed happily. Zhang hadn't been making breakfast himself before, for he would either go to the restaurant or let his servants prepare breakfast. However, the arrival of Meng had made him full of motivation, and he had been getting up on time, at 6 o'clock, every day to make breakfast for his granddaughter. However, there was one small thing that made him depressed. Every time he asked Meng if the dish was delicious, Meng would first reply, "Delicious." Then she would add, "But it's not as delicious as my papa's. Papa is the most powerful." After several times like this, Zhang never asked that question again. "Han, did you have enough rest? Why don't you go and sleep some more?" Xuanhuan walked out of the kitchen and smiled at Zhang Han. "I'm fine, thank you." Zhang Han shook his head slightly. Meng looked up at Xuanhuan and said solemnly, "Well, Papa never gets up late. It is Mama who likes sleeping late, and she is still in bed now." "Wow. Meng is so lovely," said Xuanhuan with a smile. "Yes." Meng Meng nodded. Let's sit over there. Xuanhuan led the way to the side of the sofa, holding Meng Meng's little hand, and asked with a smile. Did you drink water after getting up in the morning? No. It's good for your health to get up in the morning and drink a small cup of warm water. After they sat down on the sofa, Xuanhuan took a pot of clear water and 2 glasses. She poured a full glass for Zhang Han and half for Meng Meng. It's cold boiled water, have a drink, said Xuanhuan with a smile. Her tone was soft, just like her gentle character. Papa has a large glass of water, but I only have half. Meng Meng looked at the 2 glasses and mumbled, because Meng Meng is small and doesn't need to drink a whole glass of water, replied Xuanhuan. While they were talking, Zhang Han picked up the glass and drank it up. I'll drink it up, too. Meng Meng reached out her hands, held the glass, and drank up the half glass of water one mouthful at a time. Han. Xuanhuan hesitated. What's up, mother-in-law? If you want me to do anything, just say it. Zhang Han grinned and said, I'm not a martial artist or anything else in front of you, I'm just your son-in-law, and you can say anything as you like. Yes, Grandma, don't be so courteous, my papa is the most powerful, and he knows everything. Meng Meng waved her hand. In other words, she was saying, we're a family, and don't be so courteous. Xuanhuan touched Meng Meng's pink cheek with a smile, and then looked at Zhang Han. Meng Meng hasn't applied for a kindergarten yet, so, I'm wondering if you plan to settle down in Singapore. If you agree, we can find a good manner for you. When you are busy with your work, I can take care of Meng Meng and make your life more convenient. What she said was comprehensive because she had thought about it for 2 days. She had been worried about whether Zhang Han would feel that it was he who would marry into the Zi family, but later, she had understood the martial arts world and more about Zhang Han's position in the martial arts world. Without any concern, she had planned to ask him this. Zhang Han was shocked when he heard those words, then he forced a smile and shook his head. I'm afraid not. After thinking about it, he explained, first, it's about my parents, and I can get more information on them in China. Second, I've rented a hill in New Moon Bay, and there are lots of important things on it. The vegetables I planted on the mountain are the best, but the crops on the mountain can't be transplanted, for the time being, so we will need to stay in Hong Kong. Oh, I see. Xuanhuan shook her head helplessly. Grandma, it's Papa Xanadu's and specially arranged for Meng Meng. It is gorgeous, and I like to play with Big Hai Hai, Little Hai Hai, and other dogs there. Dad also raised pigs there, and one kind of them has long hair. Also, there are cattle, sheep, chickens, ducks, etc. We can't stay here, we have to go back, or Big Hai Hai and Little Hai Hai will miss me. Grandma, why don't you visit us? Said Meng Meng proudly. Yes. Zhang Han nodded and said with a smile, Mother-in-law, you and father-in-law can visit us to Hong Kong, whether you want to start a company or do anything else. Okay. Xuanhuan said with a smile, we are going to Hong Kong with you for a holiday, but we will come back later. Archien just promised Mr. Wang to be the vice president of the Chamber of Commerce yesterday, and it's time for him to show his capabilities. Zhang Han smiled and shook his head slightly. At that moment, Ziqiang held out his head from the dining room and said, breakfast is ready. Let's have breakfast. Meng Meng jumped off the sofa and ran to the dining room. After breakfast, while Xuanhuan accompanied Meng Meng to play with toys on the sofa, Ziqiang turned his gaze at Zhang Han, expecting to challenge him. After a few seconds, he adjusted his mood and said confidently, Han, play 300 rounds of Go with me. Okay. Zhang Han smiled and nodded. Then they sat in the small sofa of one side, took out the Go, and began fighting. With the development of the Go games, it was more and more difficult. Ziqiang felt the challenge and looked at the chess game seriously. He held a chess piece in his fingers, thought for a few minutes, and quickly made a move. Before Zhang Han could react, he breathed out a long breath, and said in a deep voice, "Excuse me." At that time, Zhang Han would stop making moves. Now that Ziqiang had said he had won the game, it was no use for Zhang Han to struggle. Therefore, Zhang Han would study the endgame for another minute and then show a look of surprise and admiration. "Father-in-law, this move is wonderful." Zhang Han shook his head. His words always made Ziqiang smile happily and proudly. In his opinion, if he played Go with a poor player, he wouldn't be very happy even if he won, while it was true happiness to play against skillful players and never lose. If Xian was here to watch them play, she would definitely say 2 words to Zhang Han, "Drama King." Even though she couldn't understand every of their moves, according to Zhang Han's eyes and her understanding of him, she could find some clues. In the morning, until 11:30, they had been playing Go, occasionally taking a rest. It was almost noon, and Ziqiang went to make lunch. Zhang Han looked at the time and found that Xian had also slept for more than 6 hours, so he was going to wake her up for lunch. Looking at Meng Meng, he said, "Meng Meng, let's wake up Mom. Let's wake up Mama." Meng Meng put down her toys and went back to the bedroom with Zhang Han. The little girl ran 2 steps forward and put her hand on the edge of the bed. Upon seeing that Xian was still sleeping, she whispered, "Mama, Mama, it's time to get up. The sun has risen very high, Mama." Under Meng Meng's call, Xian soon opened her eyes. When she saw Meng Meng, she smiled, held out her hand, and it gently pinched her face. "Give me a hug." Xian stretched out her arms and held Meng Meng for 2 minutes. Only when she was fully awake did she sit up and stretch. "What a good sleep, I'll get up. Mama, go to brush your teeth and wash your face, Grandpa is preparing lunch." Meng Meng reminded her. "Okay." Xin nodded, got up, put on her shoes, and then hugged Zhang Han. Every time she was in his arms, she felt at ease. Then she put on her clothes and went to clean herself. Before lunch, Zhang Han went to the side and dialed Su Long's number. "Director Zhang, we were just talking about you. What can I do for you? I wonder if you have any furnaces. I want to borrow one for about 2 hours, said Zhang Han. "Well, yes, I have. But what's the grade of the furnace do you want? If you prefer a high-quality one, I remember that Grandmaster Chai in Western Mountain has a holy level furnace, but he is ill-tempered, and I have to ask him for instructions first. In addition, I have a heaven-grade furnace myself, but I don't know if it is suitable for you," replied Su Long. "A heaven-grade one is enough," said Zhang Han. "When will you come and get it? Shall I send someone to pick you up?" said Su Long. 1 o'clock in the afternoon. "Okay, I'll arrange it now." Su Long replied and hung up. "Are you going out this afternoon? Won't you take me?" asked Xian behind him. "Well, I'll go out and get you a little present," said Zhang Han with a smile. "Oh, don't tell me, or it won't be a surprise." Xian rolled her eyes at him. Zhang Han smiled because he was going to show her the necklace as soon as he came back. Xuanhuan sat beside them and smiled at them, saying, "Let Han prepare it himself. Yan, let's see what you're going to wear tomorrow." Meng Meng raised her head and asked, "Then what am I going to do?" "You'll come and see beautiful clothes with us," said Xian with a smile. Meng Meng asked again, "When will Papa come back?" Zhang Han thought about it and answered, "I'll be back in 3 hours. That's a long time." Meng Meng mumbled. A few minutes later, they had lunch in the restaurant, and then Zhang Han went out. There was already a spirit group member waiting in front of the door. When he saw Zhang Han, he bowed to him and said, "Good afternoon, Master Zhang. The chief is waiting for you at the base." "I see." Zhang Han nodded, followed him outside, got on a Hummer, waiting in front of the house, and then they drove slowly to the gate of the manor. On the way, they passed the square they had seen before and saw that there were many people busy doing something on it. Several of them, wearing black suits and carrying notebooks, kept pointing to different directions. Apparently, they were designing the engagement venue for the following day. Zhang Han smiled happily at the thought of his engagement with Xian. After leaving the Ziclan's manor, they drove all the way north for about 20 minutes and arrived to an unnamed office building. The office building was about more than 30 floors, and its appearance was quite magnificent. When entering it, Zhang Han saw many staff members walking back and forth. "Master Zhang, this way please." The man led the way to the elevator and went up to the 27th floor. When the elevator opened, Zhang Han saw more than 10 people led by Sulong, Grandmaster Zhang. They greeted Zhang Han. Zhang Han nodded and replied with a smile, "This way, please, the furnace is in the innermost room." Instead of saying anything else, Sulong took Zhang Han directly to the room he mentioned. Everyone else was sitting in the chairs outside the door, while only Sulong and Zhang Han entered the room. The room was empty, with an area of about 50 square meters. In the center, Zhang Han saw a ball-shaped furnace. Sulong introduced, "It's called 7 Gold Furnace and is made of 7 kinds of metal treasures. It once belonged to an alchemy master, who unfortunately died unexpectedly when he was exploring a relic a few years ago. We took back the furnace and put it here, and occasionally we would ask some masters to help us make some elixirs. We have prepared the firestone and silver you mentioned." Zhang Han looked at Sulong and said, "Well, thank you very much, Grandmaster Su. They are all small things." Sulong smiled, hesitated for a moment, and asked, "Can I stay here as an onlooker?" "Sure." Zhang Han nodded and walked towards the furnace. He took out a palm-sized Xuanhuan void gold from his bag, threw it into the furnace, and then summoned a firestone to float to the lower side of the furnace. The furnace was ignited in a flash, indicating that he started refining the Xuanhuan void gold. Sulong was stunned, because Zhang Han was refining that metal rather than elixirs as he had expected. However, he did not speak and watched in silence. More than an hour later, he saw a flash of light in Zhang Han's eyes, and then 2 silver bars flew into the furnace. In about 5 minutes, the flame went out, and a necklace floated out of the furnace, which immediately attracted Sulong's eyes. The chain of the necklace was made of silver, with a crown pattern on it, which gave a solemn feeling. At the lower end was a pink heart-shaped diamond the size of a thumb, which was shining. "This necklace is really unique." Sulong couldn't help but admire it. Even he, a man with poor aesthetic standards, thought it was good-looking. Thus, it was sure to attract all women. He recalled that he had heard from his granddaughter that, at present, the largest pink diamond was called Pink Star, which was a little bigger than a nail. It was nearly 60 carats and had been auctioned for more than $70 million. The present one was more precious than diamonds in terms of materials. Being made of a heaven-stage gem, the pink and bright pendant was about 200 carats in size. After refining the necklace, Zhang Han picked it up to check it, and then he smiled and put it in his pocket. Then 18 cards flew out of his pocket and disappeared into the furnace, after which another firestone began to burst into flames. There were still 2/3 of the Xuanhuan void gold in the furnace, which were all leftover bits and pieces and could be used to refine his weapons. Sulong watched from one side and saw the flickering light in Zhang Han's eyes from time to time. He was a little surprised because he didn't sense Zhang Han using magic. After another hour or so, suddenly, a dull sound came from the furnace, then the cards flew out and fell back to Zhang Han's pocket. Sulong couldn't control his expression anymore. They were just Earth-grade treasures. Why did they become heaven-grade treasures after being refined once? Sulong asked in confusion, how were these treasures refined? Zhang Han thought about it and gave him 3 words, soul sense see. Soul sense see? Sulong was even more confused, but he soon understood what Zhang Han meant and asked excitedly, is it psychokinesis? Grandmaster Zhang, are you able to use psychokinesis? Zhang Han pondered and replied, almost the same. In truth, psychokinesis was different from soul sense. Psychokinesis was a kind of energy formed before the cultivator's soul sense C was born. which would continue increasing the difficulty of opening up one's soul sense. See, in comparison, cultivating their soul sense was the right way for cultivators. Obviously, being a martial arts grandmaster was not enough to reach this level. Well, Long didn't care about it. Seeing Zhang Han coming to the door, he hesitated and said, "Master Zhang, could you please do me a favor?" Zhang Long glanced at him and asked, "What's it?" Long paid her obeisance and asked politely, "Mu, my grandson, has been practicing earth magic, but he reached the bottleneck 1 year ago and can't go any further. I had been worrying about him until I got to know that you, Grandmaster Zhang, knew a lot about magic. When you were in the swamp, the light wave at your feet was the result of using water magic, right? Maybe you also have studied earth magic, so I wonder if you could guide Mu?" He was very respectful, indicating that he really cared about his grandson and expected him to make a breakthrough. Without hesitation, Zhang Han nodded and said, "Okay." He had a free attitude towards life and was free to do whatever he wanted. His code of conduct was to give more respect to those who respected him and more harm to those who hurt him. Obviously, Long belonged to the former, so Zhang Han was willing to guide his grandson. With Zhang Han's promise, Long was overjoyed. Just now, he had been worried about it, because cultivators were usually reluctant to teach their own magic to others, or give advice to others' cultivation. Naturally, they wanted to keep the last card. Therefore, Zhang Han's promise made him admire the generous and righteous master even more. Mu is downstairs in the backyard. Is it convenient for Master Zhang now? Long asked again. Let's go now. Zhang Han nodded. They left the room and took the elevator downstairs. Chapter 449. The Engagement. As Long arrived at the first floor, he directly headed for the door leading to the square behind. There were still a lot of pedestrians on the first floor. On seeing Long guiding the young man with a wide smile forward, most of them were stunned. My gosh, it's so rare to see leading Kada Su smiling. Who is that handsome guy? Wow, he is obviously a big shot since leading Kada Su treats him so respectfully. Can he be Mu? Many people present were chatting with each other. At that point, the face of the captain beside them twisted all of a sudden and he said, "Be quiet. He is not Mu. Mu is in the square behind." The man, as a real big shot, is even more powerful than leading Kada Su. Hiss. Gasps were heard in succession, for they failed to figure out how a man in his 20s could be more powerful than Long. Under many people's gazes, Zhang Han and Long walked out through the side door. Behind the office building lay a square with a square sand area on the left edge, about 30 meters in length and width. At that moment, Mu was standing at the center of the sand, facing a superior of the spirit group, who was at the Grandmaster early stage. Around them stood a dozen people. It was apparent that the two of them had just finished fighting. A middle-aged person was on the opposite side of Mu, whose legs were tied by a strand made of threads of sand at that time. As the sand was constantly climbing upward, it seemed that his body would be completely tied up within 6 seconds. "You're so awesome, Child Su, I lost." The middle-aged man gave a wry smile, then saluted and said, "Child Su, you do have a good knowledge of the earth spells, and those several moves totally dazzled me. I thought I could fight back after defending, but I did not expect that my legs would be bound by your killing move. You're indeed powerful." That's right. The earth spells that Child Su grasps have reached a high degree of professional proficiency. We can only use our spiritual force to complete a few low-powered killing moves. Several people around gasped in admiration over and over again. Of course, although most of them, except for the middle-aged person, were Heaven Stage Masters and a minority of them were Earth Stage Masters, so they could not unveil the profound mystery. A high degree of professional proficiency. Mu shook his head slightly, then looked back and said in great admiration, "He is the true talent." After hearing what he said, everyone was dumbfounded and turned their heads to the right. When they saw Zhang Han, who was standing dozens of meters away. Many people's faces changed. Fierce Zhang. Everyone fell silent and particularly agreed with what Su Mu said, but they found it a little weird at the same time. After careful calculation, they realized that Fierce Zhang was only 26 years old, which chilled them at the thought of it. Although he was only 26 years old, they all equated him with the strong men of the older generation. As for Su Mu, he was almost 24 years old, though he was a man of really high intellect. Thus, he was not a patch on Grandmaster Zhang, which made others sigh with emotion. Emperor King was born in the Huan nation, followed by Fierce Zhang later. It's indeed a place with vast territory and abundant talents after all. Under everyone's gaze, Su Long and Zhang Han approached them. Chief Su, Grandmaster Zhang. Everyone greeted them one by one. There was also some ordinary staff in the spirit group. Generally speaking, people of the martial arts world called Su Long Chief Zhang, while ordinary people would call him leading Kader Su, but no matter how he was titled, he was the captain of the spirit group. Su Long nodded with a smile, then looked at Su Mu and said with a smile, Xiao Mu, I specially invited Grandmaster Zhang to give you some advice. If you have any questions in cultivation, you shouldn't miss this opportunity. What? Su Mu froze, then he was mad with joy and hurriedly said while saluting, Thank you, Grandpa, thank you, Master Zhang. Well, Zhang Han stepped on the sand pile, stopping 10 meters away from Su Mu. Realizing that Zhang Han was looking at him, Su Mu hurriedly pondered then stated his problems. I happened to see a mudslide 4 years ago, whose irresistible power shocked and enlightened me all of a sudden. I made out the earth spells at that moment and am somewhat knowledgeable about them after several years' research and understanding. But now, I have encountered a bottleneck, in which I cannot find a way out to change my methods of attack. Zhang Han waved his hand and said, Show me your most powerful skill. Okay, I'll start, Grandmaster Zhang. This movement is called Striking Snake, which took me a year to sort out. After finishing speaking, Su Mu suddenly waved his hands as his spiritual force flew into the air. It was the spiritual force that formed a small whirlwind and winded up the sand 3 meters in front of him, taking the shape of a snake and moving forward fiercely. Although the snake's body looked very small, the several chi strength masters nearby took a few steps back on account of its enormous power. Moreover, Su Mu did not take advantage of too much spiritual force to control the sand while carrying out this movement. In fact, he used the sand, stones, and soil with high proficiency by virtue of his deep understanding of the earth spells. The middle-aged man who fought against him before said, Child Su's movement is very swift and fierce. If he had used it just now, I definitely wouldn't have resisted him. However, as soon as he finished his words, Zhang Han waved his hand calmly. An invisible force directly shredded the snake. Simultaneously, Zhang Han shook his head slightly. It's too fancy. Swish. Su Mu's expression became stiff, as his mind was filled with mixed emotions. He was somewhat uncomfortable since the attack that took him 1 year to figure out was negated by someone else. This movement is to trap people, Su Mu added and suddenly extended his palm forward. At that time, the sand and stones beneath Zhang Han's feet turned into a rope and circled upward in an instant, seemingly trying to bind Zhang Han. At that moment, the eyes of the middle-aged person beside him brightened. I just was defeated by this movement and don't know how Grandmaster Zhang will resolve it. He knew Zhang Han was bound to resolve it, but he had not expected that he could resolve it so fast. The ropes made of the sand and stones just reached Zhang Han's feet. At that point, Zhang Han stepped down slightly. Bang! The 2 ropes were shattered directly. You don't have enough control of this movement. Zhang Han shook his head again. He sighed with emotion in his mind that they were at the ending era, without various complete spells, supernatural power, secret skills, and inheritances after all, so it was really difficult for people to make out the movements alone. After pondering for a while, Zhang Han gave him some advice. Your trapping spell can be improved if you practice it more, though its power is limited. I think that you can combine the two moves, that is, the instant you move, the ground spike should appear, which will bring much greater power. Bang! Su Mu had been a little frustrated since Zhang Han undermined his confidence, but what he said at that moment bombarded Su Mu's mind. A picture gradually formed in his mind. If the striking snake was displayed through the trapping spell and directly took shape beneath the enemy's feet in a spear tip instead of a snake, suddenly sticking out of the ground, its power would indeed reach a higher level. I see. Su Mu said while saluting. After thinking for a while, he did not choose to show the last two attacking moves, for they were his stunts that he treasured for years and he thought they were definitely out of question. He, therefore, said, I also learned a defensive move, called Thick Soil Shield. After he finished speaking, he arched his arms and stretched them out. At that time, a series of spiritual forces formed a large shield in front of him as the strands of sand spread upward. In the meantime, Su Mu said, this does double the defensive power of the energy shield. However, Zhang Han could not help smiling. Once upon a time, he had been as naive as him and thought that spiritual force would be more effective if he added something to it. However, that was not the case. After thinking for a moment, Zhang Han waved his hand and said, the thick soil shield is useless. It seems that you have drowned in misdirection. Instead of understanding the skills according to the power of thick soil, you may as well figure out the movements first, then add the power of thick soil, and keep trying to fuse your own combat skills. The 5 elements reinforce each other. If you are only engaged in studying the earth spells, you will certainly encounter a bottleneck. Take the water for example. As soon as Zhang Han's remark was made, the Flood Dragon card in his pocket shook all of a sudden. The semi-transparent waves overwhelmed Su Mu, who was in a trance the instant he felt the majestic energy. Because the nature of heaven and earth beats the scarce, water defeats fire. Because refinement beats firmness, fire defeats metal. Because hardness beats softness, metal defeats wood. Because concentration beats chaos, wood defeats earth. Because reality beats virtuality, earth defeats water. The key point of these sentences is that there is no absolute mutual promotion and restraint. Earth restrains water, but water can destroy earth. The 5 elements are extremely mysterious, but you are not familiar with that now. The path is still long, and you should understand it step by step in the future. After finished his words, Zhang Han took his energy back and said while looking at Su Mu, if you have time, you can delve into other attributes. First and foremost, you should have a brief understanding of water and wood. Moreover, you can learn from those who are proficient in these fields, if possible. It's getting late, I should leave. Zhang Han glanced at Su Long, nodded, and turned to leave. Just after he took a few steps, Su Mu came to his senses. As his eyes were imbued with mixed feelings, he saluted Zhang Han's back and said loudly, thank you so much, Grandmaster Zhang. Zhang Han didn't turn back, but walked straight into the office building. Su Long stared at Zhang Han's back and slowly shook his head. Grandmaster Zhang is too formidable. I have seen Emperor King a few years ago, and I feel he is not as unfathomable as Grandmaster Zhang. As far as I am concerned, he is a rare talent who conceals his strength. But Emperor King makes breakthroughs at an incredible speed. I am afraid that he will reach the Grandmaster late stage in the coming years. The middle-aged man said. People like them can't be judged with common sense. However, Grandmaster Zhang does win my admiration. Although he possesses such incredible skills, he actually runs a restaurant in the busy city, concealing himself in a bustling place and pursuing peace. His temperament is obviously beyond that of ordinary people. Su Long sighed softly. Even him, such an old person, failed to give up pursuing martial arts, let alone a young man. In fact, Su Long found it a bit strange. Under everyone's gaze, Zhang Han disappeared in front of the office building. After entering the square ahead and taking a few steps, the driver walked up to him. Grandmaster Zhang, I'll take you back, the man said respectfully. Okay. Zhang Han nodded. After he got in the car, it slowly headed for the manor of the Ziklan. Just after the car left the square, Zhang Han dialed Xian's number. Honey, have you finished your work? Yes. Where are you? Are you still choosing the clothes? Zhang Han asked. No, I finished and bought a pink slip dress. I'm heading home now and will arrive within 20 minutes, Xian replied. Meng's voice was faintly heard from the mobile phone. Papa, we'll go back soon, you should come back quickly. Zhang Han laughed. I'll get there at about the same time. Let's chat after going back. Okay, Xian answered. After hearing what Zhang Han said and thinking for a while, the driver kept pressing the accelerator to speed up, so that they drove into the manor of the Ziklan in 20 minutes. When the car passed by the mansion, he saw Xian and Meng playing on the lawn at the entrance. Zhang Han quickly got out of the car. Papa. The little lady ran over happily. Zhang Han hugged her in his arms. I missed you, Papa. Meng kissed Zhang Han's cheek. With Meng in his arms, Zhang Han smiled and returned to the mansion with Xian. Upon entering the mansion, they saw Ziqiang, in high fighting spirit, sitting in front of the small tea table. The chess pieces already set. He looked at Zhang Han composedly and said, Han, come on, play 300 chess matches with me. Zhang Han was a little speechless. Actually, he wanted to play with Meng for a while. Meanwhile, he was wondering if he should defeat his father-in-law. After pondering, he decided to act as a training partner honestly. After 3 matches, Ziqiang felt really comfortable on account of successional victories and went to make dinner and delight. By then, Zhang Han had some spare time. He walked behind the sofa and whispered in Xian's ear, "Close your eyes." Xian was somewhat stunned and rolled her eyes quickly, then obediently closed them. At that point, both Xuanhuan and Meng looked at Zhang Han with curiosity. He took out a necklace from his pocket and slowly put it around Xian's neck. Well, Zhang Han chuckled. Xian opened her eyes and hurriedly looked down. All she could see was the lower part of the necklace and the shining Xuan void gold. Ah, you inlaid it into a necklace, Xian said in surprise. After finishing her words, she quickly got up, ran to the mirror, and looked it over 3 times. Then she looked at Zhang Han and pursed her lips. It's so beautiful. You are the most beautiful. Zhang Han smiled. Judging by Xian's gaze, she would have kissed him if his mother-in-law had not been sitting there at that time. Well, how about me? Meng mumbled. Ha ha ha, you are also the most beautiful. Zhang Han touched Meng's little head. It was not until then the little lass felt contented. Xuanhuan took a sip of tea and looked at Xian's necklace with a smile, saying, "It's a very nice necklace, which is very suitable for Xuanhuan. Of course, this is what he specially made for me," Xian said pleasantly. "Papa, I also close my eyes, I also want a surprise." Meng looked up at Zhang Han, then quickly closed her eyes, sitting there in earnest and waiting. Zhang Han found her both funny and annoying. After thinking for a while, a piece of toffee flew from the food bag on the side to his palm as he moved his fingers. Xuanhuan's eyes were full of amazement when she saw his behavior, for she seldom saw martial artists displaying their skills, and it was the first time that she had seen telekinesis. But when she thought that such a powerful son-in-law actually played chess with Ziqiang all day long and lost over and over again, she burst into laughter. "Have you finished, Papa?" Meng could not wait to ask. "Well, open your eyes," Zhang Han said, placing his palms in front of Meng's head. "Oh, toffee." Meng's eyes lit up and she cheered in surprise. "Wow, you're so awesome, Papa, I have toffee." Meng happily picked up the toffee, removed the wrapper, then put it into her mouth and ate it. Seeing Meng's cute look, the 3 of them all laughed and shook their heads. In fact, sometimes children are easy to make satisfied because they like to be cared for and loved. After more than 10 minutes, they began to have dinner and then took a break. At that moment, Ziking's eyes were imbued with fighting spirit again. Father-in-law, what if we play several chess matches? Fine, he'd better take initiative to ask him this time. Zhang Han opened his mouth first. That's what I was thinking, Ziking said slowly and entered the battlefield with Zhang Han again. The matches were not over until 9:30, then everyone went to rest respectively. However, at that time, the square of the Ziclan was decorated with lanterns and streamers. Many people were busy setting up the layout for the engagement. Zikingshan, the previous patriarch, monitored the progress in person, and at the same time, he also sent invitations to those who came over a few days ago as well as many celebrities. Even so, some people still attended without an invitation. It was not because they neglected to send invitations to them, but they were not close to the Ziclan. In fact, they never even knew some of them. So, the next day, at 11 o'clock in the morning, the roadside on both sides of the manor of the Ziclan was extremely congested, tightly packed. At that point, a bus was caught in the middle, failing to move for 10 minutes. But at that time, the passengers on the bus did not urge the driver, but looked around quietly. Many people even took out their mobile phones to take pictures and start recording. Their exclamations were heard from time to time. What the hell is going on? Why are there so many luxury cars? Oh my god. Isn't that one of the 10 limited Ferraris in the world? That one behind is also a limited Aston Martin, Rolls-Royce, Maybach, extended Bentley, Bugatti. Why are there so many luxury cars? It seems that all the luxury cars in Singapore are here. That is not the point. Look at their license plates. Do you see the string of 7s? That's the car of Mr. Ling, the chairman of the Lingfor Group. Do you see the string of 0s? It's the car of Director who has a great background. This is the scene of the century, and I don't know what happened. Although the traffic was very congested, other cars were still moving forward. The bus, however, was motionless. Some people who had something urgent finally lost patience and tried to urge them on. Driver, you can squeeze in and drive forward. Let's go quickly, I'm in a hurry. The driver turned to look at him slowly, and said bitterly, brother, normally, I would push my way through, but now, if you were me, would you dare to move? I'm going to get killed if I scratch any of the cars ahead. If you are really anxious, you'd better get out. I don't dare to move. Don't you see that the private cars on the left also don't dare to move? I'm sorry. Alas, please open the door and I'll get off the bus. Eventually, he sighed helplessly. Putting himself in the driver's shoes, he indeed would not dare to move. This scene astonished all the people around. What actually happened? Why did so many big shots in Singapore come here in person? What happened to the Ziclan? They never thought that it was just an engagement ceremony of the Ziclan. In the meantime, since many big shots were very busy, they only had to make time to come here at 11 o'clock, leading to the traffic jam. Fortunately, the cars were still moving slowly. At about 11:30, the cars finally entered the manor of the Ziclan in succession after half an hour. Chapter 450, Influence. The customs of engagement rituals usually vary from region to region. For instance, a series of processes, such as ancestor worship, is required in some certain places. However, these customs were simplified a few years ago in Singapore, and today, Zhang Han and Xian engagement ceremony was much simpler, free of complicated steps. The engagement ceremony just began at 11:58. At that moment, the younger members, from 5 or 6 to 16 or 17 years old, of the Ziclan were so glad that all ran around the square. Both in the square and on the platform were placed lots of rectangular dining tables, with some sweets and snacks on them. In addition, the drinks treasured by the Ziclan were generously provided today, whose storage capacity was reduced by 80% in an instant. At that point, as the representatives of the bride's side, Ziqiang and Zixini, as well as Wang Ming and Rong Jiaxin, were dressed formally. Ziqiang and Wang Ming were in tailored suits, while the two ladies were in formal dresses. They were sitting at the table on the edge of the platform. Beside them sat Zhang Han, who seemingly looked 10 years younger and did not use his dragon staff. Ziqingshan and 3 men who were twice as old as him were sitting on the side. There was an open space next to the table that was covered with various gifts. The patriarch of the Fan clan put a box in his right hand on the table and said with a smile, "Brother Zhang Han, congratulations, this is Earth-grade sand ice." He looked at Zhang Han with a wide smile as his eyes were full of envy, then he could not help saying, "It's a blessing to get such a son-in-law." At that time, Rong Jiaxin shook her head with a smile. "Patriarch Fan is so courteous, it's Han's blessing to marry Ziyan." Ha ha ha. Fan Kongfing laughed a few times. "Brother Fan, please sit down, and later we will have a drink." Zhang Han smiled with a nod. "Okay." Fan Kongfing took Patriarch Fan, the patriarch's wife, and 2 other people to the table inside and sat down. "Brother Ziqiang, congratulations, this is an emerald dragon that I asked others to make. Congratulations to the Zi clan for getting such a handsome son-in-law." Patriarch Liang brought Liang Mengkai and Liang Hao as well as his wife. While speaking, Liang Hao put the tray on the table and opened the cloth above. Suddenly, they saw a delicate emerald dragon with a length of 20 centimeters, raising its head as if it were roaring. "Icy jadeite." Ziqingshan's eyes narrowed slightly, and he sighed with emotion at how generous the Liang clan was. He conservatively estimated that this emerald dragon was worth more than 20 million yuan. "Patriarch Liang, you are so courteous, please come inside." Ziqiang stood up and said with a smile. After greeting this group of guests, some others also arrived soon. They were Su Long, Su Mu, and a superior of the spirit group. "Congratulations, this is Earth-grade serene dream grass." After chatting with each other for a moment, the 2 of them walked in and sat down, and then plenty of people arrived in succession. There were about 6 people in this group, headed by Ao Yuan, who led Mahdi and some other people of the Heavenly Talisman sect. At ordinary times, they would return to the sect after the exploration. However, since Zhang Han had rescued them, they decided to stay in Singapore for another 2 days in order to appreciate his big favor. Moreover, they informed the disciples of their sect to prepare a generous gift to Singapore. "Hello, I'm Ao Yuan, an elder of the Heavenly Talisman sect. Grand Master Zhang saved our lives, so we've come here to congratulate him after learning that he was getting engaged today. These are 99 Earth-grade magic figures. I wish Grandmaster Zhang and Miss Zi would be together forever." Ao Yuan saluted and said, "Thank you, Elder Ao Yuan. Please." Wang Ming hurriedly stood up and answered while saluting. Ao Yuan and his companions went inside and sat down. By then, Wang Ming glanced at the magic figures several times. It was so generous for them to send 99 Earth-grade magic figures. However, it made sense since Zhang Han had saved them. Earth-grade magic figures were Earth-grade treasures, but the 2 of them were different. As consumables, they were no match for ordinary Earth-grade treasures. Besides, the energy of each Earth-grade magic figure was less than that of a blow of a Grand Master, but it won in sound effects and convenience. After Ao Yuan entered, some heavyweights arrived in succession. "Congratulations, Brother Zhang Han, this is an Earth-grade heavenly heart plant. Congratulations, this is an Earth-grade 1000-year gold." The large number of gifts really stunned Ziqingshan, Ziqiang, and Wang Ming. These people were so generous that they sent at least Earth-grade natural precious materials. In addition to the natural precious materials, there were some valuable gold, silver, and jewelry. Ziqingshan conservatively estimated that the value of that jewelry must have exceeded 300 million yuan. In the meantime, his heart was trembling. This is the influence of a super grand master, however horrible he is. He was receiving presents at this table, while Wang Zanzong and his companions were standing by the table not far away, with handfuls of red envelopes. They would go down the square and walk around, giving them to the juniors of the Zi clan to convey good messages. Those who did not have a lot of pocket money at ordinary times became extremely joyful. Each red envelope contained 9,999 yuan, and even Zifeng came over to pick up a red envelope. The changes in the Ziclan these days did surprise him. It was not a joke. Actually, Ziqiang and Ziqingshan also talked to him a few times, obviously having the intention to have him operate the family business. Therefore, he became more and more grateful to Zhang Han. He did not care too much about how high his worth would be, but he desired to pursue a bigger stage and dominate in the commercial circle. The Ziclan was so busy today that both the platform and the square were full of people, which forced Ziqingshan to ask others to get some tables and chairs hastily. He had not expected the occasion to be so spectacular. But no matter how crowded it was quite empty near the central stage of the platform. The ground on the left and the corridor were decorated with bouquets, most of which were roses. Simultaneously, there were two large screens on the rear side of the central stage, allowing everyone in the square to see what was happening on the stage, surrounded by high-quality speakers. All the specifications were in accordance with the best standards. Moreover, today was a sunny day without any clouds in the sky. The weather forecast originally said that it would rain, and people could even see large dark clouds in the morning. But at 8 o'clock in the morning, bang, 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 as a burst of rain eliminating bombs rose into the air, the dark clouds exploded directly, forming local rainfall. By 9:30, it had become a fine day. At 11:40, Zhijiangshan even stood up when catching sight of a heavyweight, leading cadre who, Secretary Yuan and an old man walked over, accompanied by two guards. Jiangshan, congratulations, I brought some tea to celebrate today's happy event, leading cadre who said with a smile, thank you. A few minutes after they arrived, Hong Kitao and Tang Jie, chairman of Honglin Entertainment of Hong Kong, arrive. Liu Qingfeng, chairman of the Liu Group, arrives. Liu Tanan, director of the National Security Agency of Hong Kong, and Elder Leng arrive. Director Ma and Director Liu of the Royal Entertainment Company arrive. Patriarch Chu of Hong Kong arrives. The various heavyweights dazzled the juniors present, especially Ziqingshan, because he was in charge of putting every gift on the open space next to him. His arm was even sore on account of so many presents the first time. Whether sending the gifts or doing something else, there were several professionals recording nearby, preparing to edit a complete video as a souvenir that could be kept forever. Finally, it was 11:55. Melodious music was heard from the surrounding speakers. Meanwhile, a young man in a suit stepped onto the stage and glanced down. Catching sight of plenty of famous big shots, he could not help his legs from shaking. He swallowed and took a few deep breaths, then looked at the square and tried to calm himself down, saying loudly, all distinguished guests, leaders, relatives, and friends, we welcome you in attending today's engagement party for the couple-to-be. Welcome. As the host spoke in a loud voice, he got into a groove. He looked at Ziqiang, Wang Ming, and some others who were sitting on the edge, then reached out his hand to give a sign and said with a smile, I just saw that the gifts here are piled up. The time is limited, so our parents should make some preparations. After he finished his words, two staff members hurried to Ziqiang and led them inside. At that moment, the host looked forward again and said loudly, today is a happy day, a couple-to-be will spend the rest of their lives together. The opening words were no more than 3 minutes. At 11:58, he said loudly, facing the corridor decorated with banquets, now, welcome our groom-to-be, Mr. Zhang Han. The music then sounded. Zhang Han appeared on the other side of the corridor well adorned. He, with a simple haircut, was dressed well today in a well-fitting suit. He smiled and stepped onto the stage slowly. At the same time, the camera connected to the large screen behind also made a close-up of Zhang Han's cheek. Those who had not seen Zhang Han before in the square could not help but marvel. The son-in-law of the Ziclan is so handsome and capable. How lucky they are. After Zhang Han approached the host, The host smiled and asked, "Now I would like to ask our groom-to-be, what's your feeling at this point?" Then he put the microphone close to Zhang Han's mouth. Zhang Han nodded slightly and said with a smile, "I'm happy, excited, feeling beatific." Well, the words contain a profound meaning though they sound simple. I hope Mr. Zhang will be happy in the future. Next, let us welcome today's bride-to-be, Xian. Another melodious piece of music rang out. Xian showed up on the other side of the corridor, her beautiful big eyes blinked, and she stared at Zhang Han. She did not walk forward, while Ziqi and Xuanhuan were standing behind her. The camera was aimed at Xian, who was in a pink slip dress and showed cuteness, dignity, and sex appeal. On seeing her, all the people present shook their heads and sighed that she was indeed a beauty. However, many fair ladies stared at the necklace hanging on Xian's neck on the big screen. The diamond is so big and so beautiful, even bigger than the pink star. During their exclamations, the host added, "Does our groom-to-be have anything to say to his fiancée now?" Zhang Han stared at Xian and said slowly, "Xian, I love you." These 3 words already contain everything. Now Mr. Zhang can pick up his beautiful fiancée and walk on this romantic stage with her. As soon as he finished speaking, Zhang Han strode over to Xian and held her hand. The two of them looked at each other for a while and walked forward shoulder to shoulder. Ziqi glanced at them several times and curled his lips, for he was still somewhat reluctant at that time. Fortunately, the host did not say some sensational words, so he could still restrain himself. He and Xuanhuan followed them and stepped on the stage. After he finished another part, the host grinned and said, "Today's engagement ceremony is different from an ordinary one in that our groom-to-be and bride-to-be have already had a crystallization of their love, a beautiful little princess. It's very special, and this is a late but romantic engagement. Well, let's welcome our little princess." As he finished his words, Meng appeared on the side of the stage, holding a small bouquet in her hands. The pink roses were specially taken from Mount New Moon, and in the bouquet was placed a ring box. The little lady glanced around with her big shiny eyes. So many people, she muttered to herself and looked forward. "Papa, Mama, I'm coming." After saying that, she leapt to her feet and ran to the glass aisle. Because she did not maintain her balance, she slipped and jerked forward involuntarily. But just when she was about to fall, Zhang Han's eyes flashed slightly. A gentle power was straightening up Meng's body. What's wrong?" Meng looked at herself several times and slowed her paces down, coming to the stage step by step. During this period, the camera shot had been following Meng. Meng's exquisite cheeks subdued everyone present. Dressed in a white princess's dress, she was really like a princess from a fairy tale world. Normally speaking, raising a baby out of wedlock was not very proper in famous families, but today, everything seemed to become romantic and beautiful. Many people were envious of this scene.